On the coldest night of my life, I was sleeping in a broken camper with an aging German shepherd named Rook pressed against my chest. Then my mother died and left me a condemned lake house that everyone in my family wanted destroyed. They said the inheritance was worthless. They said I was too damaged to save it. But the first night inside, Rook heard an old machine clicking beneath the pantry floor. What he found below that house led to a flooded tunnel, a missing military archive, and the truth about the teammate I had blamed myself for losing. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful stories about loyalty, courage, and the quiet miracles that can bring a broken person home. The night my mother died, I was sleeping behind a boat repair yard with a German shepherd pressed against my ribs and a flare gun under my pillow. I did not know she was dead yet. All I knew was that the temperature had fallen low enough to turn the inside of my old camper white with frost, and Rook had begun making that soft sound in his throat that meant I was dreaming too hard again. He never barked when the nightmares came. He simply climbed closer. That was the first thing I loved about him. He did not ask where I had been. He did not ask what I had done. He did not tell me that 14 years was long enough to get over anything. He put his weight against mine until I remembered where the floor was, where the ceiling was, and what year I had returned to. I opened my eyes in the dark and found his face inches from mine. Rook was a 9-year-old German shepherd with a black saddle, a scar across the bridge of his nose, and one amber eye that had gone cloudy around the edge. His left hip bothered him in wet weather. His hearing, however, was better than any piece of equipment I had trusted during 22 years in the Navy. "Still here," I whispered. His tail struck the cabinet once. That was our morning roll call. "My name is Nathan Calder." I was 53 years old that winter, though the mirror in the boatyard restroom suggested an older man had stolen my face. I had spent most of my adult life serving in Navy special warfare. I had crossed black water under skies with no moon. I had learned to read the silence before gunfire. I had brought men home, and I had failed to bring others home, which is a sentence a man can survive without ever finishing. After I retired, I tried construction, security work, and a warehouse job that ended when a forklift slammed a pallet behind me, and I put a coworker on the concrete before I understood where I was. No one pressed charges. That kindness made it worse. My marriage had already ended by then. My daughter called on birthdays until I started letting the calls go unanswered. I told myself I was protecting her from the version of me that woke up fighting shadows. The truth was less noble. Shame had made me selfish. By the time I met Rook, I had sold almost everything that proved I had once expected a future. He had been retired from military service after an injury and passed through 2 homes that could not handle his sleepless pacing. At the rescue center, he ignored the tennis ball, ignored the volunteer, and stared at me through the chain-link gate. I knew that stare. It said, "Do not promise me anything you cannot carry." I took him home that afternoon. Home at that time was a rented room above a laundromat. Later it became the camper. Then the camper became a permanent answer to questions I had stopped asking. The envelope arrived 3 days after my mother died. It was tucked under the windshield wiper, damp from the lake wind blowing in from the marina. Mr. Hanley, who owned the repair yard, had accepted it at the front office and walked it out himself. He was a narrow, stooped man with silver eyebrows and hands permanently stained by engine grease. "You ought to read this one," he said. I looked at the return address. Vale and Sutter, attorneys at law, Chillen County. My stomach tightened before I opened it. Some names are doors. You can live your whole life in another town, sleep under another roof, grow gray in places where no one knows your childhood, and one name will still open a room inside you. Chelan was that name for me. Lake Chelan lay east of the mountains, long and cold between steep brown ridges. My mother had lived there most of her life. She had raised my sister and me in a white house near the old apple warehouses, then spent her later years at a decaying property on the South Shore called North Lantern House. I had not spoken to her in 11 years. The letter was brief. Evelyn Calder had died after a stroke. The reading of her will would take place Friday morning at 10. My presence was requested, not needed, not welcomed, requested. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it along the same crease and placed it on the small table beside Rook's water bowl. Mr. Hanley remained outside the camper. "You going?" he asked. No, Rook looked at me. Mr. Hanley looked at Rook. Between the two of them, I was outnumbered. The drive across the mountains took most of Thursday. My camper could manage level ground if treated with respect, but the pass demanded prayer, patience, and a willingness to ignore several noises that would have concerned a better funded man. Snow crowded the shoulders. Trucks pushed gray spray across my windshield. Rook sat upright in the passenger seat, watching the road with the solemn concentration of a retired admiral. By late afternoon the mountains opened, and the lake appeared below us. Lake Chelan in winter did not look welcoming. It looked ancient. The water was a dark blue blade laid between stone hills. Empty orchards climbed the lower slopes in strict brown rows. Farther up, snow held the ridgelines under a pale sky. I had forgotten how the light moved there, sharp and silver, making every old memory seem close enough to touch and cold enough to cut. I stopped at an overlook. Rook stepped down carefully, favoring his bad hip, and stood beside me in the wind. Across the water, somewhere beyond a bend, stood North Lantern House. When I was a boy, my mother used to ring a brass bell from its porch at supper. The sound carried over the shore, through the cottonwoods, across the narrow cove where my sister and I fished for trout from a leaking rowboat. Back then the house had red shutters and a roof the color of cedar bark. My mother filled the kitchen with soup, coffee, and strangers. There were always strangers, older men in work jackets, women with tired faces, young veterans who sat where they could see the door. My mother called them travelers. She never explained why some stayed one night and others stayed a month. As a child, I assumed every family kept extra boots by the back steps. Then my father left. My sister, Marianne, learned to blame my mother for everything. I learned to leave before anyone could leave me. The Navy made that talent useful. My mother and I did not end with one great argument. We ended the way shorelines disappear, one small piece at a time. A missed Thanksgiving, a letter I did not answer, a visit where she asked whether I was sleeping and I lied. The last time we spoke, she said, "Nathan, you cannot spend your whole life standing watch outside your own door." I told her she did not understand. She said, "Then help me understand." I hung up. 11 years later, I stood above the same lake with an old dog and no idea what words belonged beside regret. The law office occupied the second floor of a brick building above a wine shop. I arrived early Friday wearing the cleanest clothes I owned. Dark work pants, a blue shirt with one frayed cuff, a brown coat from a church donation rack. My boots were polished, but no amount of polish could hide the slit near the left toe. Rook wore his leather collar and walked beside me without a leash. At the top of the stairs, a receptionist stared at him. "He stays," I said. She must have heard something in my voice because she only nodded. The conference room smelled of coffee, paper, and expensive wood. My sister was already seated. Marianne Vale was 59, 6 years older than me, and still carried herself like the smartest person in any room. Her hair, once black, had turned silver and was cut in a smooth line against her jaw. She wore a cream coat over a charcoal dress, a string of pearls at her throat, and the expression of a woman attending a business inconvenience rather than her mother's final accounting. Beside her sat her son Preston. He was 34, broad across the shoulders, clean-shaven, and dressed in a tailored navy suit. He had inherited his mother's gray eyes and none of her discipline. When we were younger, I had tried to be the uncle who showed up with pocket knives, fishing lures, and stories I cleaned up for children. After my life came apart, Preston stopped calling me Uncle Nathan. That morning he looked down at Rook and smiled. I thought the building had rules about animals. "Rook has better manners than most people I know," I said. Marianne did not rise. "You came," she said. "It was not warm." It was not cruel. Somehow that made it worse. A few minutes later, Arthur Sutter entered carrying a leather folder. He was a heavy-set man in his 70s with a careful white beard and tired brown eyes. I remembered him from church picnics when I was young. He had once let me steer his fishing boat while my mother shouted from shore that I was too small. He shook my hand with both of his. "Nathan," he said quietly, "I am sorry." I almost asked what he was sorry for. Her death, the 11 years, the room, my clothes, the dog. There were too many choices. He sat and opened the folder. The will began as wills do, with formal words trying to make grief behave like property. My mother's house in town had been sold the previous year. Her savings, investment accounts, and insurance proceeds went into a family trust controlled by Mary Ann. Her jewelry went to Mary Ann. A collection of antique maps went to Preston. Several orchard shares went to them both. I felt no anger. I had expected nothing, and nothing is a sturdy place to stand. Then Arthur paused. To my son, Nathan Elias Calder, he read, I leave North Lantern House, including the dwelling, the shoreline parcel, the detached workshop, the old pump station, and all contents remaining on the property. Preston gave a short laugh before he could stop himself. Mary Ann closed her eyes for 1 second, as though my mother had made a final embarrassing joke. Arthur continued. The property is transferred with all existing obligations, restrictions, code notices, and unpaid assessments. That sentence changed the air. Preston leaned back. There it is, he said, the gift with teeth. Arthur looked at him sharply, but Mary Ann lifted one hand. Nathan should understand what he has inherited. North Lantern is barely standing. The county has cited the roof, the septic system, the electrical panel, and the shoreline stairs. The winter assessment is overdue. There may also be penalties connected to the access road. How much? I asked. Arthur named a figure large enough to make my camper seem luxurious. I stared at the polished table. Preston's voice softened into false sympathy. You can disclaim it. Honestly, that would be sensible. North Lantern has no practical value unless it is cleared. We already have an interested buyer for the adjacent parcels. If you sign the property over, we could fold it into the sale and save everyone trouble. There it was, not concern. Speed. Rook rose from the floor and pressed his shoulder against my knee. I looked at Mary Ann. You already have a buyer? An inquiry, she said. A development group from Seattle. They want a small wellness resort. Cabins, a restaurant, private docks. The whole South Cove could finally become useful. Useful. The word landed harder than I expected. I remembered wet boots by my mother's kitchen door. Men sleeping on the enclosed porch. A woman crying into a bowl of soup while my mother pretended not to notice. Whatever North Lantern had been, useful was not a word strangers from Seattle had invented for it. Arthur removed a brass key from the folder and placed it on the table. A round tag hung from it on a faded blue cord. The tag was stamped with a single word. Pantry. Mary Ann's face changed, only slightly, but I had spent too many years watching people before doors opened to miss it. She looked at Arthur. What is that? It was included with Evelyn's instructions. I have never seen it. Arthur's hand remained on the key. There is also a condition. Nathan must personally inspect the property before he may disclaim it. Evelyn was explicit. Preston laughed again, but this time there was tension under it. Mother, this is ridiculous. The place is full of mold. Maybe she hid a jar of peaches for him. Mary Ann did not answer. She was staring at the key. Arthur slid it toward me. The brass was cold against my palm. Your mother asked me to tell you something, he said. The room went still. She said, he will hear what the others could not. Mary Ann stood so quickly her chair rolled backward. This is theatrical nonsense. She was heavily medicated near the end. Arthur's tired eyes hardened. She gave me those instructions 8 months before her stroke. For the first time that morning, my sister looked afraid. Not sad, not angry. Afraid. That was the moment I decided to keep the house. Maybe pride decided for me. Maybe guilt did. Maybe I simply wanted to know why my mother had left a pantry key to the son who had ignored her for 11 years. I closed my hand around the brass. I will inspect it, I said. Preston leaned forward. You are making a mistake. I have made better ones. I stood. Rook stood with me. Mary Ann stepped into my path before I reached the door. Up close, I could see the fine lines around her mouth and the faint tremor in her left hand. Nathan, she said, lowering her voice. You do not know what condition that place is in. You do not know what mother became obsessed with. Let us handle the sale. Take some money, find an apartment, get help. There are sentences that sound like mercy until you notice they require your surrender. I looked at the pearls at her throat, then at the sister I once followed through orchards with scraped knees and stolen apples in our pockets. What are you afraid I will find? I asked. Her face emptied. "Rot," she said. "That is all that is left there." North Lantern House stood at the end of a narrow road where snow had drifted over the ruts and blackberry vines clawed at the fence posts. By the time Rook and I arrived, the afternoon light was fading. The first thing I saw was the porch bell. It still hung beneath the eaves, green with age, twisting slowly in the wind. The second thing I saw was the roof. Marianne had not exaggerated about that. A long section sagged over the western rooms. Shingles littered the yard. One gutter had torn free and hung like a broken arm. The red shutters were gone. Several windows were boarded, and the white paint had peeled until gray wood showed through like exposed bone. The house faced the lake with the stubborn dignity of something too tired to fall in public. I parked near the workshop. For a while I stayed behind the wheel. Rook waited. "You ever inherit a disaster?" I asked him. He sneezed on the dashboard. "Good talk." The front door resisted the key until I put my shoulder into it. Cold, wet air rolled out. The entryway smelled of cedar, mildew, mouse nests, and the faint mineral odor of old lake water. Dust lay thick over the floor. A dead moth rested inside the shade of a wall lamp. The staircase leaned slightly toward the kitchen, which seemed less like architecture and more like a warning. Rook moved ahead of me. His nails clicked across the boards. He checked the living room, the hallway, and the first bedroom. At each doorway, he paused, listened, and continued. Old habits. I found evidence that someone had been inside recently. Not a squatter, not an animal. A clean boot print crossed the dust near the back hall. A cabinet door stood open. Papers had been pulled from a desk and left scattered on the floor. In the kitchen, one drawer had been emptied into the sink. I crouched beside the boot print. The tread was narrow and expensive, not the deep work pattern common around the lake. Rook sniffed it, then looked toward the pantry. The pantry door was painted blue. As a child, I had believed that room was magical because my mother could enter with an empty basket and return carrying flour, apples, candles, or a jar of candy she claimed not to own. Now the blue paint was blistered. The brass knob was missing. A chain had been looped through a metal latch and secured with a new padlock. New. Everything around it was old enough to remember my childhood, but the padlock shone. I took the brass key from my pocket. It did not fit. Rook's ears lifted. He stepped closer to the door and placed his nose against the gap near the floor. Then he froze. Every line of him changed. His tail lowered. His shoulders tightened. His good eye focused on something beyond the wood. I knew that posture. Rook had but once been trained to detect explosives. Years had passed, and his working days were behind him, but training settles deep in a dog. Deeper than pain, deeper than age, he inhaled again. Then he backed away and looked at me. Not danger, exactly. Information. I searched the kitchen and found a rusted hammer beneath the sink. 3 strikes broke the latch loose. The pantry opened with a sigh. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Most were empty. A few held cloudy jars, a sack of hardened flour, and stacks of old newspapers tied with string. The room was colder than the kitchen, though it had no exterior window. Rook entered slowly. He ignored the shelves. He ignored the jars. He walked to the center of the floor and began scratching at a square of cracked linoleum. "Easy," I said. He scratched harder. But the sound beneath his paw was wrong. Not solid wood, hollow. I knelt and pulled at the linoleum. It tore in stiff pieces, releasing the bitter smell of old glue. Beneath it lay wide cedar planks darkened by age. At first I saw nothing. Then Rook placed one paw beside a knot in the wood. There was a narrow seam. 4 straight lines formed a square nearly 3 feet across. A hatch. I brushed away dust and found an iron ring recessed into the floor. Beside it was a keyhole rimmed in green brass. The pantry key slid in perfectly. For several seconds I could not turn it. My hand had begun to shake. I remembered my mother's message. He will hear what the others could not. Behind me the house creaked under the wind. The old porch bell moved once outside, giving a dull, lonely note. I turned the key. Something heavy released beneath the floor. Rook stepped back. I pulled the iron ring. The hatch rose less than an inch before stopping against resistance below. A breath of air escaped through the gap. It smelled of machine oil, old coffee, and cedar smoke. Not mold, not soil, a room. There was a room beneath the pantry. I reached for my flashlight, but before I could lift the hatch again, White lights swept the kitchen wall. Headlights. A vehicle had turned into the drive. Rook spun toward the back door. A growl rolled through him, low and certain. The engine outside went silent. I killed my flashlight. For one long second, nothing moved. Then someone stepped onto the porch. The boards complained under a slow, deliberate weight. The doorknob turned once, twice, and from the darkness beneath my hand, something clicked like an old machine waking up. The person outside tried the back door again, slowly this time, not the impatient rattle of someone who had forgotten a key. This was careful pressure, applied by a hand that did not want the old latch to make noise. Rook stood between me and the kitchen. His body was low. His ears pointed forward. The growl in his chest had settled into a vibration I could feel through the floorboards. I lowered the pantry hatch until only a thin gap remained. The clicking beneath it stopped. The kitchen went silent. A shadow moved across the curtain over the back door. I reached under my coat and wrapped my hand around the flare gun tucked into my belt. It was not much of a weapon, but at close distance it could change a man's plans. The knob turned again. Then a voice came through the door. "Uncle Nathan Preston." Rook did not relax, neither did I. "What do you want? I saw your camper. I wanted to make sure you did not freeze to death." His concern sounded as natural as a wolf asking about a lamb's blood pressure. "You can go. We should talk. We already did." The porch boards creaked as he shifted his weight. "I know Mother can be difficult," he said. "She is grieving. She does not always explain herself well." I looked at the clean boot print in the dust near the hallway. "How did you know I was here?" Silence, only a second. "Long enough. It was obvious you would come straight to the house." "You drove almost an hour in the dark because it was obvious?" "I am trying to help you." Rook's lips lifted. I stepped closer to the door without opening it. "Were you inside this house before today?" "No." The answer came too quickly. I looked toward the pantry floor. The hidden hatch was invisible beneath the torn linoleum, unless a person knew where to search. "Then you have helped enough." Preston's voice changed. The polished warmth disappeared. "North Lantern is dangerous. The county could condemn it at any time. If you stay here and get hurt, do not expect Mother to clean up the mess." "My mess has never been her concern." "You do not understand what you are standing in." "No," I said, "but I am beginning to think you do." The silence on the other side became heavy. Then the porch boards groaned again. His footsteps moved away. A car door slammed, the engine started, and the headlights withdrew across the kitchen wall. I did not move until the sound disappeared down the access road. Rook remained facing the door. "Family reunion went well," I whispered. He turned his head toward the pantry. The old machine below us clicked again. Not randomly, 3 kapaws, then 2 more. I lifted the hatch. This time nothing blocked it. It rose on heavy iron hinges, exposing a narrow staircase dropping into darkness. A cord hung beside the opening. I pulled it. A single yellow bulb came alive below. The room was deeper than I expected, about 12 feet long and 8 feet wide, built beneath the pantry and part of the kitchen. Cedar beams reinforced the ceiling. Shelves covered 2 walls. A narrow desk sat at the far end beneath a corkboard crowded with faded photographs, maps, and handwritten notes. Against the left wall stood a large reel-to-reel tape machine. Its metal casing was green. 2 brown reels rested on top. Dust coated everything except the switch and the round timer attached to the side. That was the clicking I had heard. The timer was still running. Someone had wound it recently. I descended slowly. The air was cold but dry. Whoever built the room had sealed it well. There was no mold, no mouse damage, and no water staining. My mother had protected the space better than the house above it. Rook followed, placing each paw carefully on the steep steps. At the bottom, he lifted his nose and breathed in. The room contained the smell of my childhood: cedar smoke, coffee, machine oil, my mother's lavender soap. For a moment, I was 9 years old again, standing in the kitchen while she kneaded bread and sang off-key to the radio. Grief does not always arrive as pain. Sometimes it arrives as recognition. I sat on the lowest step because my knees no longer trusted me. Rook leaned against my shoulder. "I should have called her," I said. He gave no judgment. Dogs understand that regret is already punishment. On the desk lay a large envelope with my name written across it. Nathan. Not Mr. Calder, not son. Just Nathan, in the narrow, slanted handwriting that had once appeared on lunch sacks and birthday cards. I reached for it, but the tape machine began to turn. The left reel moved first. Then the right reel caught the tape, pulling it across the metal heads with a soft mechanical whisper. A speaker crackled. I rose so fast the chair behind me struck the wall. Then my mother's voice filled the hidden room. "Nathan, if you are hearing this, then Rook found the hatch." I stopped breathing. Her voice was older than I remembered, thinner. But it carried the same low steadiness she used when storms knocked out the power and frightened children pretended not to be afraid. "I hope he is with you," she continued. "I asked Arthur to make certain you kept the dog after my death. He said I could not place a German Shepherd in a legal will without causing more trouble than I had already caused." A faint laugh followed. My mother's laugh. The sound broke something open in my chest. Rook walked toward the speaker and tilted his head. She knew his name. I had never told her about him. "I know you have questions," the recording said. "Most of them will begin with how. Some will begin with why. The most painful will begin with why not sooner. I do not have a good answer for that one." The reels turned steadily. "North Lantern House was never merely our family home. You understood that when you were a boy, though I never gave you the words. Your father and I began bringing veterans here after the winter of 1982. We had 3 empty rooms, a wood stove, and more confidence than money. Men came through the county hospital, the church basement, and the bus station. Some stayed one night. Some stayed until they could remember who they were without a uniform." I looked around the room. The photographs on the wall began making sense. Men and women stood on the porch in different seasons. Some wore old military jackets, some leaned on crutches. One held a baby, another stood beside my father with his hands buried deep in his pockets, looking at the camera as if he expected it to accuse him. The house became part shelter, part kitchen, part listening post. My mother said. "We called it the Lantern Line because people arrived through quiet referrals. We did not advertise. Many of those we helped were afraid of institutions, ashamed of their circumstances, or trying to escape someone who knew how to use paperwork as a weapon." The tape hissed. "I kept records because I believed records protected people. Later, I learned that records can also hunt them." I moved closer to the desk. A row of metal file drawers stood beneath it. Each drawer had a year written on a small paper label. There were decades of names in that room. "Your father died believing the Lantern Line had ended," she said. It did not. I continued the work in smaller ways. Food, temporary rooms, right to medical appointments, help with benefit claims. Sometimes all I could offer was a locked door and a night without questions. My father had died while I was on deployment. I came home for the funeral and left before my mother could finish packing the food people brought to the house. I remembered Marianne and telling me the place had become too expensive. I remembered the strange men who stood at the edge of the cemetery and removed their hats when my mother passed. I had thought they were old friends. They had been witnesses to a life I never understood. Marianne discovered the records 6 years ago, the recording continued. She believed the house could be sold and the shoreline developed. She was not wrong about the money. The land is worth more than I ever imagined. But she did not understand that ownership was divided through an agreement your father and I created with the Lantern Trust. I searched the desktop. Beneath a stack of maps lay a leather binder stamped with a small brass lantern. The trust owns part of the shoreline access, the pump station, and the rights to the spring beneath the western ridge. Without those rights, no large development can legally operate on the South Cove. That explained Marianne's fear. The house was not the valuable piece. It was the lock on everything around it. Marianne tried to have the trust dissolved, my mother said. Preston helped her. They argued that the work had ended and the beneficiaries could no longer be identified. They were nearly successful. I delayed them with old agreements, missing signatures, and a talent for becoming confused whenever their attorneys visited. Her voice warmed with restrained satisfaction. I was not as confused as they hoped. Despite myself, I smiled. That sounded like my mother. Then her voice lowered. But I made a terrible mistake. The smile disappeared. Years ago, a man came to North Lantern asking for help. His name was Wade Mercer. He had served with distinction, but he was violent, frightened, and carrying information that put other people at risk. He claimed that a private security contractor was stealing disability payments from veterans under guardianship. He had documents, names, account numbers. The tape wavered for a second. I did not believe all of his claims. Wade was ill. He heard threats in ordinary sounds. He accused people without evidence. Then one night, someone followed him here. I looked toward the ceiling. The house above us gave a long wooden groan. I became afraid, she said. Not for myself, for Marianne, for Preston, who was still a child. For the people whose names were in these files. I asked Wade to leave. My mother paused. I gave him money and drove him to a motel outside Wenatchee. 2 days later, he disappeared. The tape continued, turning through several seconds of silence. I told myself I had protected my family. I told myself Wade had moved on. But I knew I had closed a door on a man who came to me, because every other door had already closed. Her voice cracked. It was the first time I had ever heard my mother sound ashamed. He was later declared dead, though no body was found. The documents he carried vanished. After that, I began receiving pieces of information in the mail. Copies of checks, guardianship orders, lists of veterans whose benefits had been redirected. Someone wanted me to finish what Wade began. On a lower shelf sat several gray document boxes. Each bore the same handwritten word, Mercer. I hid everything here, she said. I told no one, not even Arthur. I wanted to protect the people involved, but fear has a way of dressing itself as caution. Years passed, the company changed names, the accounts moved. Some of the lawyers retired, others became judges, donors, and respected businessmen. The hairs rose on my arms. This was no family argument over a decaying house. My mother had buried evidence beneath the kitchen floor. I contacted a federal investigator last year, she said. Before I could deliver the full archive, my home was entered. Nothing obvious was taken, but someone knew about the lantern line. The boot print upstairs flashed through my mind. Preston had said he had never entered. My mother continued. I no longer knew whom to trust. Marianne had already signed an option agreement with the development group. Preston began asking about old files. He claimed he wanted to preserve family history. He has never cared about history unless it's old. Rook moved toward the far wall. He began sniffing along the baseboard. There is more beneath the pump station, my mother said. Do not go there alone. Rook stopped. Do not trust the county records showing it as abandoned. The station still has power. Someone has been using it. The tape machine clicked. The first reel slowed. Nathan, I know what you are thinking. You are thinking this is another mission. You are measuring doors, exits, names, and danger. That is how you survived. But this house does not need a soldier who knows how to disappear. It needs my son to remain. I closed my eyes. Her final words to me 11 years earlier returned with cruel precision. You cannot spend your whole life standing watch outside your own door. I watched your life from a distance, she said. I knew about the warehouse. I knew about the divorce. I knew where you parked the camper. I knew about Rook, because Mr. Hanley sent me photographs when you would not answer my letters. I almost laughed. Mr. Hanley. The old traitor had known all along. I wanted to come to you, she said. Several times I packed a bag. Each time I told myself you needed space. That was pride pretending to be respect. I am sorry, the speaker hissed softly. If you choose to walk away from North Lantern, I will understand. But first, open the envelope. There is one person you must find. He may be the only living man who knows what happened to Wade Mercer. The reel stopped. The room fell silent. I stood motionless beside the machine. My mother had been dead for less than a week, yet her voice had just crossed 11 years of anger and found me beneath the same kitchen where she once fed strangers. Rook nudged the envelope with his nose. I opened it. Inside was a photograph, a handwritten address, and a letter. The photograph showed my mother standing beside a man in a wheelchair. He was perhaps 70, with a narrow face, deep-set eyes, and a gray beard cut close to his jaw. A dark knit cap covered his head. One sleeve of his coat was pinned neatly above the elbow. On the back, my mother had written, Chief Petty Officer Samuel Reed, the last man who saw Wade alive. The address belonged to a retirement community outside Yakima. The letter was addressed to Samuel, not me. I unfolded it. Samuel, Nathan may come to you after I am gone. He will not ask for trust, and he will not believe he deserves it. Give him the truth anyway. Tell him about the winter convoy. Tell him what Wade carried. Tell him why North Lantern was chosen. Most of all, tell him that the man he failed to bring home was not his fault. My hands went cold. There were details of my service I had never shared with my mother. Names I had not spoken outside closed military rooms. One of them belonged to a man named Elias Reed. He had served under me during my final deployment. He had died in a flooded tunnel while I stood less than 20 feet away, trapped behind a steel door that would not open. Samuel Reed, Elias Reed. The room seemed to tilt. Rook pressed against my leg. I read the last line again. Tell him that the man he failed to bring home was not his fault. My mother had known Elias's father, perhaps long before Elias ever joined my team. A sharp metallic crash sounded upstairs. Rook launched toward the stairs. I folded the letter, shoved it inside my coat, and followed him. The back door stood open. Wind pushed snow across the kitchen floor. The broken latch hung from one screw. Someone had entered while the recording played. I moved through the hallway, checking each doorway. The living room was empty. The front door remained locked. In the room that had once been my father's office, desk drawers had been pulled out and overturned. Rook followed a scent toward the western side of the house. The floorboards there sagged beneath our weight. A second crash came from outside. The workshop. I crossed the yard at a run, flare gun in one hand and flashlight in the other. Snow struck my face. Rook reached the workshop first and barked at the sliding door. A dark sport utility vehicle was parked behind the building, where it could not be seen from the house. Not Preston's car. The workshop door stood open. Inside, a man in a hooded coat was pouring liquid from a red fuel can across the old wooden floor. Step away from it, I said. He turned. A black cloth covered the lower half of his face. Only his eyes showed beneath the hood. He dropped the fuel can and reached inside his coat. Rook hit him before I could fire. The German Shepherd drove into the man's chest, knocking him backward across a workbench. Tools fell around them. The man struck Rook near the injured hip, and Rook cried out. That sound removed the last careful thought from my mind. I crossed the distance and slammed the attacker against the wall. He smelled of gasoline and wintergreen chewing tobacco. He swung an elbow toward my throat. I blocked it, struck his wrist, and felt something small fall from his hand. A lighter. He drove his knee into my side. Pain flashed beneath my ribs. We crashed into a shelf, sending old paint cans across the floor. The man was younger than me, strong, trained enough not to panic. But he had made a mistake. He had hurt my dog. I twisted his arm behind him and forced him face first against the workbench. Who sent you? He laughed through the cloth. Then he stamped backward onto my injured foot. My grip loosened. He tore free, threw himself through the side door, and ran toward the sport utility vehicle. Rook tried to follow but stumbled. I stopped. Every instinct told me to pursue the man. Get the plate, disable the vehicle, finish the threat. Then Rook tried to stand and cried out again. I chose him. The vehicle roared away through the snow. I dropped beside Rook. His breathing came fast. He held his left rear leg above the ground. I ran my hands along his ribs, hip, and spine, checking for blood, swelling, or broken bone. Easy, partner, easy. His amber eye remained fixed on me. He licked my wrist. Even hurt, he was trying to calm me. The fuel had spread across several floorboards, but no fire had started. The lighter lay near the doorway. Beside it rested a small black device no larger than a matchbox. I picked it up with the edge of my sleeve. A red light blinked on one side. A remote transmitter. The attacker had not only planned to burn the workshop. He had been carrying equipment. I searched the room while Rook rested near the door. Behind a cabinet, I found two wires running through a freshly drilled hole in the wall. They led beneath the floor and disappeared toward the old pump station at the edge of the property. Someone had connected the workshop to a remote circuit. The machine under the pantry, the pump station, the transmitter. They were parts of something I did not yet understand. I carried Rook back to the house in my arms. He weighed nearly 90 pounds, and my ribs protested every step, but I would have carried him across the mountains if he needed it. Inside, I made a bed beside the wood stove using my sleeping bag and 2 dusty blankets. I checked his leg again. There was swelling around the hip, but no obvious fracture. He drank water, accepted a piece of dried meat, and placed his head across my boot. You are getting too old for this, I said. His tail moved once. So am I. The nearest emergency veterinarian was open through the night. I lifted him into the camper, wrapped him in another blanket, and started the engine. The dashboard lights flickered, then every gauge dropped to 0. The engine died. I tried again, nothing. When I opened the hood, the problem was obvious. Someone had cut the battery cable cleanly. The attacker had disabled the camper before entering the workshop. He had planned to leave me stranded with a burning building. I looked toward the dark lake. Snow moved sideways through the beam of my flashlight. The road was already disappearing beneath it. My phone showed no signal. Rook waited inside the camper, watching me through the windshield. I had survived worse conditions. That did not comfort me. There is a particular helplessness in knowing how to save lives, but lacking the simple means to help the one creature who saved yours. Then I remembered the old porch bell. As children, Marianne and I had been told to ring it if someone was hurt on the water. The sound carried across the cove to a farmhouse on the eastern ridge. That farmhouse might no longer exist. The bell might no longer carry. But old systems sometimes survive because everyone forgets to destroy them. I climbed the porch steps, grabbed the wet rope, and pulled. The bell gave a dull clang. I pulled again. The second note traveled farther. Again. Again the sound rolled across the frozen shoreline and vanished into snow. For several minutes nothing answered. Then, from somewhere beyond the cove, another bell rang. One clear note. A second followed. Headlights appeared on the ridge road. The truck that reached North Lantern belonged to a woman named June Holloway. She was in her late 60s, small and straight-backed, with white hair braided beneath a red wool cap. She wore insulated overalls, heavy boots, and the expression of someone who had been awakened by emergencies for most of her life and had never learned to resent them. She climbed out carrying a medical bag. "Where is Evelyn?" she called. The question stopped me. "She died." June stood in the snow. Her face changed slowly. "I knew she was ill," she said. "I did not know. I am Nathan. I know who you are." She pushed past me toward the camper. June had been a veterinary technician before retiring. She examined Rook beneath the interior light, moving her hands with quiet confidence. "Nothing feels broken," she said. "He may have torn or strained something around the old injury. He needs imaging, pain medication, and rest. He will get it." She looked at the cut battery cable. "Somebody do that tonight?" "Yes. Same somebody who poured gasoline in your workshop?" I stared at her. She pointed toward my coat. "The smell is strong enough to make my eyes water." June helped me move Rook into her truck. Before we left, she studied the dark windows of North Lantern House. "Your mother rang that bell 6 times in 40 years, she said. Every time somebody's life depended on a neighbor answering. She never told me. Evelyn did not tell people what made her look good. June opened the driver's door. She only told us where to come. At the veterinary hospital, Rook received an examination and medication. The doctor believed he had suffered a severe strain but no fracture. He would need several weeks of restricted movement. Rook hated every word of that diagnosis. By dawn, he was resting on a padded mat in June's heated mudroom. I sat on the floor beside him with a cup of coffee I had forgotten to drink. June placed a plate of eggs and toast on the table. "You have your mother's talent for looking offended by food," she said. "I am not hungry. That has never stopped food from being useful. I ate because arguing required more strength." June sat across from me. "Did you find the room?" My fork stopped. She looked toward Rook, who opened one eye. "You knew about it?" I knew there was somewhere Evelyn kept records. I did not know where. She stopped trusting ordinary locks after Preston began asking questions. What questions? Dates. The spring rights were Wade Mercer. I leaned back. "You knew Wade?" "Everyone on this shore knew Wade for one winter. He arrived half frozen, carrying a green duffel bag and enough fear for 3 men. What happened to him?" June's expression closed. "That is Samuel Reed's story. You know Samuel too. I know he has been waiting for you." The room grew very quiet. "Why?" June turned her coffee cup between both hands. "Because your mother believed the wrong man died in that tunnel." I felt the blood leave my face. She continued before I could speak. "Elias Reed carried something into your final operation. Something connected to Wade Mercer and the company stealing veterans' benefits. Samuel believes Elias joined your team because he was trying to reach you. That is impossible. Maybe he was assigned through command. He was not searching for me." June's eyes held mine. Then why did he send a package to North Lantern 3 days before he died? The old refrigerator hummed behind us. Rook lifted his head. What package? I do not know. Evelyn retrieved it from the post office herself. After that, she closed the western rooms and stopped allowing anyone near the pump station. I stood too quickly and pain caught beneath my ribs. June did not move. Sit down, Nathan. What was in it? She never told me. Where is it now? Samuel may know. Outside the window, morning light spread across the snow, pale and cold. My mother had left me a dying house. Beneath it, she had hidden voices, files, and a trail leading back to the worst night of my life. Someone had entered the property before I arrived. Someone had tried to burn the workshop. Someone knew the hidden systems were waking again. I looked at Rook. He was injured because I had brought him into a fight I did not understand. For years I had believed leaving people was the only way to keep them safe from me. North Lantern was proving the opposite. Leaving created empty rooms. Empty rooms invited the wrong people inside. I need to go back, I said. June nodded once. I expected you would. I need a working vehicle. You can use my late husband's truck. I cannot take your truck. You can return it when this is over. You do not know what this is. No, she said, but I know what the bell means. Rook struggled to stand. I knelt beside him and placed both hands against his chest. You stay here. His ears went back. That is an order. He turned his head away. Retired military dogs apparently considered retirement grounds for insubordination. June touched my shoulder. There is one more thing. She opened a drawer and removed an old photograph. It showed North Lantern House during a winter storm. My mother stood on the porch beside Wade Mercer, Samuel Reed, and a much younger June. Behind them was a fourth man. He wore a dark coat, wire-rimmed glasses, and a small gold pin shaped like a mountain. I recognized him. Victor Harrow, founder of the development company trying to buy the South Cove. He had also been the chief executive of the private security contractor named in my mother's recording. On the back of the photograph, she had written 6 words. The man funding both sides of the war. I stared at Victor's younger face. Then I noticed something reflected in the window behind him. A child stood inside the house, watching the adults. A boy with neatly combed hair and one hand pressed against the glass. Preston. He had not discovered the lantern line 6 years ago. He had known about it since childhood. And whatever my mother had hidden beneath North Lantern House, my nephew had spent most of his life waiting for the chance to destroy it. Samuel Reed lived in a place called Cedar Ridge, though there were no cedars and very little ridge. The retirement community sat outside Yakima on a flat stretch of winter grounds surrounded by dormant orchards. Low brick buildings stood behind clipped hedges. A flag snapped above the entrance. Someone had arranged painted stones around a dry fountain, each carrying a word such as courage, gratitude, or hope. I had never trusted places that labeled emotions. June's old truck pulled to the curb just after noon. I turned off the engine but kept both hands on the steering wheel. Rook lay on a padded blanket behind the passenger seat. June had insisted that he remain with her. Rook had disagreed by planting all 4 paws against the door and refusing to move. In the end, we compromised. He came with me and I promised he would not leave the truck until I knew the building allowed dogs. His injured leg was wrapped. The veterinarian had given him medication, which made his eyes heavy, but had done nothing to weaken his opinion of my decisions. You stay, I told him. He looked through the windshield. Do not make me repeat myself. His cloudy eye shifted toward me. There are men who command rooms with a glance. Rook commanded guilt. I will be back. His tail did not move, alone. The woman at the front desk wore purple glasses and a knitted sweater covered with white snowflakes. She asked whom I was visiting, Samuel Reed. Her smile faded. Is he expecting you? I believe he is expecting me for several years. That answer did not comfort her. She picked up the telephone and spoke quietly. Then she looked at me again, this time noticing my scarred knuckles, my coat, and the stiffness in my walk. What was your name? Nathan Calder. She stopped with the receiver near her ear. A voice answered on the other end. The woman said my name once. Then she listened. He says to bring the dog. I looked toward the glass doors. How does he know I have one? The receptionist lowered the telephone. Mr. Reed seems to know many things before the rest of us. Samuel's apartment was at the end of a long hallway overlooking an enclosed garden. Rook walked beside me slowly, favoring his left hip. The polished floor made his steps uncertain. I kept one hand near his harness without touching it. He hated assistance unless he believed it was his idea. The apartment door stood open. Samuel waited inside in his wheelchair. He was smaller than the man in my mother's photograph. Age had narrowed his shoulders and pulled the skin tightly across his cheekbones. His gray beard was trimmed close. The empty sleeve of his green shirt had been folded and pinned above his right elbow. On the wall behind him hung two framed photographs. One showed a young sailor in a dress uniform, Elias. The other showed Samuel wearing the same uniform many years earlier, before age, injury, and grief changed his face. He looked at Rook first, then he looked at me. "You took your time," he said. His voice was rough but strong. I had imagined meeting Elias's father more times than I could count. In some versions, he struck me. In others, he asked why I returned when his son did not. In the worst versions, he forgave me. I had never prepared for irritation. "I did not know you were waiting. That has been your favorite defense." The words landed cleanly. Rook stopped between us. Samuel studied him. "He is hurt. Someone attacked him last night." "At North Lantern?" "Yes." Samuel turned his chair toward the living room. Closed the door. The room smelled of coffee and cedar oil. Books filled one wall. A small workbench stood near the window, with parts of old radios arranged in careful rows. Several walking canes leaned beside a chair. On the table sat a green metal box and 2 cups. Samuel had prepared for my arrival. I closed the door. Rook approached him without invitation. Samuel lowered his left hand. The dog sniffed his fingers, then rested his muzzle briefly against Samuel's knee. Samuel's expression changed only for a moment. "He has Elias's judgment," he said. My throat tightened. "You knew Rook?" "I knew the handler who trained him. Your mother kept me informed after Elias died. You and my mother spoke about me?" "Sometimes." "For how long?" "Long enough to know that you stopped opening her letters." I remained standing. Samuel pointed toward the chair opposite him. "You are making my neck hurt." I sat. He poured coffee one-handed with the smooth precision of a man who had performed the task thousands of times. He pushed 1 cup toward me. "I did not come for coffee." "No. You came because Evelyn finally found a way to give an order you could not ignore. My mother left me your address. She left you more than that." Samuel touched the green box. I looked at Elias's photograph. He had been 31 when he died. In the picture, he was younger, perhaps 19, with short brown hair and the uncertain smile of a man still learning how to stand inside a uniform. My memories of him were different. Wet stone walls, red emergency light, water climbing past our knees. His voice in my headset, calm until the final seconds. I looked away. Samuel noticed. "You still see the tunnel." It was not a question. "Yes." "You hear the steel door." "Yes." "And you believe he was waiting on the other side for you to open it." I did not answer. Samuel's eyes hardened. "My son did not die waiting for rescue." I stared at him. "He was alive when the chamber flooded." "I know. I heard him." "You heard what he wanted you to hear." The room narrowed around us. Rook lowered himself beside my chair. Samuel placed his hand on the green box. "Elias joined your unit because Victor Harrow's company had begun moving stolen benefit money through overseas accounts. Wade Mercer had discovered the pattern years earlier. Elias found the continuation. That was never part of our operation. Not officially. Our target was an arms broker. Your target used the same shipping network." I leaned forward. "Where did you get that information?" "From my son." "That is impossible." "Because your command did not know?" "Because Elias never told me." Samuel gave a humorless smile. "You were his commander, Nathan, not his priest." I stood. Pain moved through my ribs, but anger moved faster. He had a duty to disclose any separate objective. He had tried. "No, he sent you 3 messages before deployment." "I received nothing." "That does not mean he sent nothing." Samuel's voice remained level. "He also requested a private meeting. It was canceled after your schedule changed. The morning your team departed, left a package with a courier addressed to North Lantern House. June had told me about the package. Hearing it from Samuel made it harder to dismiss." Samuel tapped the box. "Sit down." "I did not. Tell me you came here carrying more anger than sense. Sit down before you turn my son into another weapon against yourself." The sentence reached beneath my anger. I lowered myself into the chair. Samuel opened the green box. Inside lay a small audio recorder, several memory cards sealed in plastic, a folded map, and a black notebook scorched along one edge. He took out the notebook. I recognized it. Every member of my team carried one. Waterproof paper, elastic strap, pages small enough to fit inside a field pocket. Elias had kept his notes in block letters. Samuel opened to a marked page and handed it to me. At the top, Elias had written my name, Nathan Calder. Below it were several lines. If the intelligence is correct, Harrow's network is using veterans under court-appointed guardianship to move money through foreign medical contractors. The men appear as patients. Their benefits become payments. The payments become consulting fees. The consulting fees fund private operations. Commander Calder is not involved. He must be told only when the evidence is secure. He will try to stop me if he believes the mission is compromised. He will be right. I read the last lines twice. Samuel watched me. My son respected you, he said. That was why he kept the truth from you. That is not respect. No, it was fear that your sense of duty would defeat his sense of justice. I closed the notebook. He endangered the team, yes. The directness of the answer surprised me. Samuel looked at Elias's photograph. My son was brave. He was loyal. He was also capable of believing his purpose made him wiser than everyone around him. A father can love a man without turning his mistakes into virtues. I set the notebook on the table. What happened inside the tunnel? You tell me. I had given official testimony after the operation. Then I had given it again to a review board. Later, I repeated parts of it to a military psychiatrist who spent most of the session watching the clock. I had never told the whole story to Elias's father. Our team entered through an abandoned water channel, I said. The arms broker had moved his equipment beneath a coastal pumping complex. Intelligence said the lower passages were dry. They were not. No, the memory arrived with physical weight, salt water against my legs. The smell of metal and concrete, my own breath loud inside the headset. The tide gates had been altered. Someone triggered the intake system after we entered. We divided at the second junction. Elias and 2 others moved toward the control chamber. I took the remaining men toward the communications room. Samuel listened without blinking. The steel door dropped between us. We could hear Elias on the other side. He said he had found the release panel. Did he? I do not know. You saw the post-operation images. They showed damage near the panel. Samuel nodded. Continue. The water rose. We tried explosives on the hinges, but the corridor was too narrow. The first charge bent the frame. The second caused part of the ceiling to fall. Elias told us to stop. My hands had begun to shake. I pressed them against my knees. The structure would collapse. What else did he say? I could still hear his voice. Not screaming. That was what haunted me. If Elias had screamed, perhaps I could have placed the memory among ordinary horrors. Instead, he had sounded calm. He said there was another route. Samuel's eyes remained on mine. Was there? No. There was. I stopped. Samuel reached into the box and removed the audio recorder. The control chamber had a maintenance shaft. It led to a dry service passage behind the pumping system. Elias found it. That was not in the plans, no. He would have told us. He did. Samuel placed the recorder on the table and pressed a button. Static filled the room. Then Elias spoke. His voice was older than the photograph and younger than the dead. Chief, I found a narrow maintenance shaft behind the western housing. It is above the waterline. I can reach the external conduit from here. The recording crackled. My own voice answered. Stay where you are. We are cutting the door. Elias spoke again, negative. The frame is failing. Another charge brings the ceiling down on your side. I remembered those words. The rest had not been included in the recording provided to the review board. Elias continued, I have the archive. The conduit leads outside the secured zone. I can transmit from there. My recorded voice cut through the static. What archive? A long pause followed, then Elias answered. The reason they flooded the tunnels. The recording skipped. When it returned, I heard gunfire, not from our corridor. From Elias's side, he breathed hard into the microphone. There are 2 men in the service passage. They knew where I was going. I looked at Samuel. My mouth had gone dry. The official report said he drowned. The official report was written before his body was recovered. His body was never recovered. Samuel nodded. The recording continued. Elias whispered now. The conduit is open, sending the first file. A rapid series of tones sounded. Transfer incomplete, an electronic voice announced. Elias swore softly. Then he said my name. Nathan, listen to me. The door is not the problem. Someone on the surface closed the route before we entered. Someone new. My own voice came back. We are not leaving you. You have 5 men in a failing corridor. Get them out. We can reach you. No. Gunfire struck metal. Elias gasped. For one terrible second, I believed I was about to hear him die again. Instead, his voice returned, weak but clear. Tell my father I chose the shaft. The recording ended. I sat frozen. Rook lifted his head. Samuel turned off the device. He did not wait for the chamber to flood, he said. He entered the maintenance shaft, carrying the archive. Someone followed him. Whether he died from the wound, escaped the complex, or was taken alive, I do not know. I tried to speak. Nothing came. For more than a decade I had built my guilt around a steel door. I had imagined Elias on the far side, watching water rise while I failed him. Now the door was no longer the center of the story. Someone had been waiting beyond it. Someone had known where he would run. Where did you get the recording? Your mother. How did she get it? From the package Elias sent before deployment. The recorder copied selected communication channels through a separate device he carried. Not all of it. Enough. He sent classified material to a civilian address. He sent evidence to the only place he believed Harrow could not control. North Lantern. Wade had told him about the house. I looked at the photograph of Victor Harrow standing beside my mother, Wade, Samuel, and June. Why was Harrow there? Samuel's face darkened because he helped create the Lantern line. The answer felt impossible. My mother called him the man funding both sides. She understood him by then. At first, Victor appeared to be our greatest supporter. Samuel moved his chair toward the window. Outside, bare apple trees stood in straight lines beneath the white sky. We were all younger. Wade had returned from service with a head full of plans and no patience for committees. Evelyn offered rooms. Your father repaired whatever broke. June handled medical emergencies. I managed radios and transportation. Victor brought money. Why? His older brother had died homeless. Or so he claimed. He paid heating bills, bought a van, and connected us with attorneys who helped veterans recover lost benefits. Samuel looked back at me. For several years, we believed he was saving the work. When did that change? When Wade noticed the same veterans were losing control of their finances after Victor's attorneys intervened. The pieces began fitting together: guardianship orders, redirected benefits, medical contractors, foreign accounts. Victor was identifying vulnerable people through North Lantern. Yes, he paid to help them, then used their information. Yes, and my mother kept the records that could prove it. Some of them. What did Wade carry? The first complete ledger. Names of guardians, shell companies, judges, contractors, and payment routes. Enough to destroy Victor before he became powerful. But my mother sent Wade away. She did. Samuel's voice contained no cruelty. Only fact. Evelyn was afraid. Preston was young. Marianne had recently separated from his father. Victor had begun visiting without warning. Wade was becoming unstable, and no one knew which of his fears were real. Then he disappeared. After placing part of the ledger inside the old pump station, I looked toward the map on the table. Samuel unfolded it. It showed the North Lantern property as it had existed decades earlier. The house, workshop, spring channel, shoreline stairs, and pump station had been drawn in black ink. A red line ran from the pump station beneath the western ridge. It continued under the lake. What is that? An old utility tunnel. It once carried a water pipe to an orchard intake on the opposite shore. Your father sealed it after a collapse. Is it passable? Samuel looked at the scarred notebook. Elias believed Wade used it. The same system. A tunnel beside water, a hidden route. A choice between a steel door and an unknown passage. The shape of my past had been waiting beneath my mother's house. Why did she tell me not to go alone? Because the pump station is not abandoned. Who is using it? Samuel picked up one of the sealed memory cards. For years, the station transmitted short bursts of encrypted data during winter nights. Your mother tracked the signal but could not decode it. The transmission stopped after her stroke. What kind of data? Bank records, court files, medical claims, we do not know. Who received it? The signal bounced through several relays. One of them belonged to a private communications company, controlled by Victor Harrow. I stood and walked toward the window. Rook followed, limping. I rested my hand on his neck. Why keep all of this from law enforcement? Samuel gave a tired laugh. Which law enforcement? The federal investigator my mother contacted. She vanished from her office 2 weeks before Evelyn's stroke. My hand tightened against Rook's fur. Vanished? Her name was Dana Cole. She sent one final message stating that North Lantern had been compromised. After that, her office claimed she was on medical leave. Then they said she had resigned. Did anyone see her? No. The attack on the workshop no longer looked like intimidation. Someone was cleaning the property, the hidden room, the wires beneath the floor, the remote transmitter. They were searching for the archive while preparing to destroy whatever remained. Preston came to the house last night, I said. Samuel's eyes sharpened. Before the attacker? Yes. Did he enter? Not while I saw him. That is not what I asked. I thought of the clean boot print, the open drawers, the new padlock on the pantry. He had been inside earlier. Samuel nodded as though confirming a fear. Preston has worked for Victor's company since he left college. He works in property development. That is the title on his business card. My anger rose again. Marianne knows. She knows enough to be afraid. I do not know whether she understands the entire network. She tried to make me surrender the property. Yes. She knew about the trust. Yes. And she knew I would find the room. Samuel glanced at Rook. She knew you might. The dog leaned against my leg. I looked at the green box. What do you want me to do? Samuel's expression hardened. Do not ask an old man to assign you a mission. That is how you avoid choosing. I need to know what Elias intended. Elias intended to expose Victor. That got him killed. Perhaps. It may have gotten Dana Cole killed, perhaps. It injured my dog and placed June in danger. Samuel rolled closer. And now you are calculating the cost of staying. Yes, good. His answer surprised me. Good. Only fools call sacrifice noble before counting who else must pay. Samuel placed his hand over the scorched notebook. Your mother wanted North Lantern reopened, not as a monument, as a living shelter. Victor wants the property because the spring rights block his resort, but the pump station matters more. Whatever Wade hid there may connect the old theft to the current network. So I searched the station. No, you just said the evidence may be there. I said do not go alone. I am accustomed to working alone. That is another lie you repeat until it sounds like experience. He pointed toward Rook. You have not been alone since the day that dog chose you. Rook looked at Samuel, apparently pleased. Someone had finally explained the chain of command. Samuel continued. June has stood watch over that cove for 40 years. Arthur protected the trust documents. Mr. Hanley kept Evelyn informed. There are veterans from North Lanterns scattered across this state. People who owe your mother nothing but remember that she opened a door. I will not bring civilians into danger. They are already in danger. I can handle the station myself. Samuel's hand struck the table. The sound was sharp. You could not open the steel door, Nathan. The words stopped me. He held my gaze, and you could not because the door was never yours to open. Elias chose another path. You saved 5 men by obeying him. Yet you have spent years calling survival a failure because grief made you arrogant. Anger flashed through me. You do not know what I carried out of that tunnel. No, he said, but I know what you left inside it. I said nothing. Trust, Samuel continued. You left trust in that tunnel. You decided every person you loved would be safer without you. Your wife, your daughter, your mother. Now you are preparing to make the same decision for everyone at North Lantern. His voice softened. That is not protection. That is control. I looked down at Rook. He had followed me through parking lots, cheap rooms, freezing nights, and every retreat I disguised as endurance. He had never once chosen distance. Samuel opened the green box again and removed a small brass object, a key. It was darker and heavier than the pantry key. 3 shallow grooves had been cut into its stem. The pump station, he said. I took it. Why did my mother leave this with you? Because she knew you would need to hear Elias before you were ready to enter. A telephone rang in the hallway. The receptionist answered. A few seconds later, hurried footsteps approached the apartment. The woman in purple glasses appeared at the door, pale and breathless. Mr. Reed, there is a call for Mr. Calder. No one knows I am here, I said. She looked frightened. The caller said it concerns his dog. Rook was beside me. Samuel pointed toward the telephone on the table. The receptionist had transferred the call. I lifted the receiver. Nathan called her. For a moment I heard only static. Then Mary Ann spoke. Her voice shook. "Nathan, Preston is missing." I looked at Samuel. "When did you last see him?" "Last night. He came home after midnight. His coat was torn. There was blood on his shirt. The man at the workshop had worn a mask. He had smelled of gasoline and wintergreen. Preston had been chewing wintergreen gum in the law office. Was he injured? He would not let me look. He took a bag from the garage and left again before dawn. Where did he go? You called me because you think I do. No. Her breath broke across the line. I called because he left his computer open. What was on it? Maps of North Lantern. Photographs of the hidden room. Messages from Victor. Samuel moved closer. Mary Ann began crying quietly and angrily as though ashamed even then. Victor told him to retrieve the Reed archive before sunset. He said if Preston failed again, they would activate the Western Line. I looked at the map. The Western Line ran from the pump station beneath the ridge. What does activate mean? I do not know. Read the message exactly. Paper moved near the receiver. Mary Ann's voice dropped. Clear the house. Open the western intake. Let the lake finish what Evelyn delayed. Samuel's face went gray. He turned toward the map. The old intake gate, he said. If it still functions, it could flood the utility tunnel. And the foundation above it. Samuel traced the red line with his finger. The western half of North Lantern sits over the collapsed section. Mary Ann heard him. Who is Samuel Reed? A silence followed. Then she whispered, Mother said he was dead. Samuel closed his eyes. Your mother told many lies when frightened, he said. Mary Ann drew a sharp breath. I gripped the telephone. Where is Victor? At a donor dinner in Seattle. At least that is what his office says. Where is Preston's vehicle? Gone. Does he have access to the pump station? Another pause. Yes. The answer came so softly I nearly missed it. How? I gave him Mother's old service key. Samuel looked at the brass key in my hand. Not the only key. Why? I asked. Because Victor promised the development sale would protect Preston. Protect him from what? Mary Ann began to answer. Then a crash sounded on her end. She gasped. The line went silent. Mary Ann? I heard a door slam. Footsteps. Then a man's voice too far from the receiver to identify. My sister screamed once. The connection ended. I lowered the telephone. Samuel was already moving toward the green box. We call the police, he said. Yes, and then? I looked at Elias's photograph. For years I believed he had died behind a door I could not open. Now another door waited beneath my family's home, and the lake itself had been turned into a weapon. I placed the pump station key in my pocket. Then we returned to North Lantern. Samuel closed the box. You are not going without me. You are not going. He looked at his empty sleeve. Do you believe this chair makes me harmless? I believe the station will be dangerous. So do I. Rook rose slowly. His injured leg trembled, but he stood. No, I told him. He stepped toward the door. Samuel gave the dog a small nod. Elias never followed bad orders either. We left Cedar Ridge beneath a sky that had begun to darken with another storm. Samuel sat beside me. The green box rested across his knees. Rook lay behind us, awake now, his nose lifted toward the cold air leaking through the truck vents. Halfway to the lake, June called. Her voice came through the truck speakers. Nathan, the bell at North Lantern is ringing. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was not yet evening. How many times it has not stopped? A continuous bell was not the signal for an injury. It was the old shoreline warning for rising water. June continued. The lake level near the western cove is dropping. Something is pulling water beneath the ridge. Samuel looked toward me. The intake gate was already open. I pressed the accelerator. Snow began sweeping across the highway. Behind us, Rook struggled to his feet and braced himself between the seats. Ahead, beyond the mountains, North Lantern House stood above a tunnel filling with black water. My sister had vanished. My nephew was somewhere near the pump station. And the man I had mourned for more than a decade had left one final message inside a route designed to drown anyone who followed him. This time I was not going to fight a steel door. This time I was going through it. By the time North Lantern came into view, the storm had erased the road behind us. Snow moved across the windshield in long white sheets. The wipers fought to clear it, but the wind pushed harder from the lake. June's old truck slid twice on the final descent. Each time, Samuel tightened his hand around the door handle and said nothing. Rook stood between the seats. His injured leg trembled whenever the truck struck a rut, but he refused to lie down. His nose remained pointed toward the house, as though the wind carried a message meant only for him. The porch bell was still ringing. It did not swing with the storm. The rope had been pulled tight through the open front door and fastened somewhere inside. Each gust tugged it, forcing the bell to strike again and again. Not a warning sent by a person, a warning turned into a trap. The lake below the house had pulled away from the shore. Mud, rocks, and the rotting remains of an old dock lay exposed beneath the falling snow. Farther out, the surface of the cove had begun to circle. Water was being drawn beneath the western ridge. Samuel leaned forward. The intake is fully open. How long before the tunnel fills? That depends on the old gate. Give me your best answer. He looked at the house. Not long enough. 3 other vehicles stood near the porch. June's truck was there, so was Arthur Sutter's sedan. The third vehicle was an old school bus painted dark green, with the words Lantern Veterans Network written along its side in fading white letters. Men and women moved between the bus and the house carrying ropes, medical kits, lanterns, blankets, and tools. I stopped the truck. A tall man in a brown canvas coat approached before I opened the door. He was perhaps 70, with broad shoulders, a gray mustache, and a metal brace around his left knee. Nathan Calder? Yes, I am Frank Dorsey. See, the name meant nothing to me. He saw that. Your mother gave me a room in 1994. I brought people who know the tunnels. Behind him, an older woman with short white hair lifted a coil of rope from the bus. A younger man carried a portable pump. Another veteran in a wheelchair directed 2 volunteers toward the workshop. I looked at Samuel. You called them? He shook his head. June rang the network. Frank glanced toward the porch. Evelyn taught us that when the bell rings, nobody asks whether it is convenient. The words struck me harder than the wind. These people had driven into a mountain storm because a woman who was no longer alive had once opened a door. I had spent years believing distance was strength. My mother had built the opposite kind of life. June came running from the house. Her red wool cap was gone, and snow clung to her white braid. Arthur found Marianne's car near the eastern access road, she said. The driver's door was open. There was blood on the seat. 2 sets. One went toward the house. One went toward the pump station. Preston? Maybe. Police on the way. The highway patrol closed the pass behind us. Local deputies are coming from the north side. Samuel looked toward the lake. They will not arrive before the western chamber fails. June nodded. The kitchen floor is vibrating. I turned toward the house. Rook had already left the truck. He limped across the snow, moving faster than he should, and stopped near the workshop. His head lowered. He sniffed along the buried wire we had found beneath the wall, then followed it toward the ridge. Rook, I called. He ignored me. The wire disappeared beneath a line of frozen blackberry vines. Rook pushed through them and stopped beside a low concrete structure nearly hidden by snow. The pump station. It was smaller than I remembered from childhood. A square building with no windows, a rusted metal roof, and a steel door set into the hillside. Water ran from beneath the threshold in a thin black stream. A fresh chain had been wrapped around the door handles. Preston's sport utility vehicle stood 20 yards away with the engine running and the driver's door open. No one was inside. I approached the vehicle carefully. A smear of blood marked the steering wheel. On the passenger seat lay a leather bag, a packet of wintergreen gum, and a handgun. The weapon had not been fired. Samuel rolled beside me in a heavy outdoor chair Frank had brought from the bus. Preston left the gun, or someone made him leave it. Rook moved toward the rear of the vehicle. He sniffed the ground, then barked once. Beside the tire, partly covered by snow, lay a pearl. Marianne's necklace. I picked it up. The surface was streaked with blood. Frank came closer. We have bolt cutters. Open the pump station. While 2 veterans cut the chain, I returned to the house. The front door stood open. The bell rope stretched across the entryway and had been tied around the banister. I cut it with my knife. The ringing stopped. For the first time since our arrival, I heard the house itself. A low shudder moved through the western wall. Glasses rattled in a kitchen cabinet. Somewhere below the floor, water struck stone with the steady force of a train moving through darkness. Arthur Sutter stood near the pantry. His white beard was wet with snow, and his coat had been torn at the shoulder. "What happened to you?" I asked. "I found Marianne on the Eastern Road." "Where is she?" "I did not find her. I found her car. Someone came out of the trees while I was searching. He knocked me down and took my telephone." "Did you see his face?" "No, he wore a dark coat." "Victor? Too small. Preston?" Arthur shook his head. "Preston is taller." Rook entered the kitchen and went directly to the open pantry hatch. He sniffed the steps leading to the hidden room. Then he growled. I descended with my flashlight. The room had been searched again. The metal drawer stood open. Papers covered the floor. The green reel-to-reel machine had been torn from the desk and smashed. The corkboard had been stripped bare. My mother's letter was gone. So was the photograph of Samuel Reed. On the far wall, one cedar panel had been removed. Behind it was a narrow metal door I had not seen before. 3 shallow grooves surrounded the lock. The pump station key matched them. I inserted it. Samuel watched from the top of the stairs. "That door connects to the old service shaft." I turned the key. The metal door opened inward. Cold air rushed through the gap. Beyond it lay a passage barely wide enough for one person. Pipes ran along the ceiling. Black cables clung to the wall. Water covered the floor to the depth of my boots and moved steadily toward the house. Rook tried to enter. I blocked him with my arm. "No." He pushed forward. "Your leg is injured." He stared past me into the tunnel. Then he gave a short bark. Something answered in the darkness. Not a bark, a human sound. A faint cry. "Marianne." I stepped into the passage. The water was colder than ice. "Get ropes," I said. Frank appeared behind Samuel. "We have them." "Portable lights?" "Ready." "Medical kit?" "June has it." I looked at the people gathering in the pantry. Older men with stiff backs, women with scarred hands, veterans who moved with canes, braces, artificial limbs, and the careful economy of those who had already spent their strength surviving other wars. "I am not taking all of you underground." Frank met my eyes. "You are not taking us anywhere. We are going where the bell sent us." Samuel rolled closer. "Listen to him, Nathan." I looked at Rook. He had lowered his body near the tunnel entrance, waiting. I understood what Samuel had meant in Yakima. A mission was not a burden one man carried while everyone else waited for permission to care. I took the lead rope and clipped it to my belt. "All right," I said. "We do this together." Frank tied the other end around a support post. June checked the medical bag. A retired engineer named Lila Grant studied Samuel's old map and marked the likely position of the intake controls. She was 72, small and sharp-eyed, with a flashlight strapped over her wool cap. "The main tunnel drops after the first junction," she said. "If the western valve is open, the current will be strongest there. Can it be closed manually? If the gears have not rusted solid, and if they have, we collapse the side channel." "With what?" A broad man near the stairs lifted a canvas case. "Old quarry charges." I looked at him. He shrugged. "Some hobbies age better than others." Frank handed me a radio. "No signal underground," I said. "Short range only." Better than shouting. We entered the passage in single file. I went first. Rook followed. Frank came behind him. Then Lila, June, and 2 others carrying rope and equipment. Samuel remained in the hidden room to coordinate with Arthur and the volunteers above. The tunnel narrowed after 50 feet. The walls changed from poured concrete to old stone. Water climbed above my ankles. The current pulled against my boots. Rook moved slowly, nose low, tracking ascent through cold air and machine oil. At the first junction, the passage divided. The left route descended toward the lake. The right route curved beneath the western rooms of North Lantern. A red emergency light blinked above the right tunnel. New wiring had been installed beside pipes older than the house. Victor had not merely discovered the system, he had rebuilt it. Rook turned right. The water rose to my knees. Every few seconds the house groaned above us. "Marianne," I shouted. A voice answered, "Nathan." Weak, close. We rounded the curve and found her behind a fallen wooden support. She was lying on a narrow ledge above the water. Her cream coat had turned gray with mud. One side of her face was bruised. Blood matted the silver hair near her temple. Her hands had been tied in front of her with plastic cord. June moved past me and knelt beside her. "Do not move," she said. Marianne looked at me. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Preston is in the lower chamber. Who took you?" Victor's man, Owen Pike. The name stirred a memory. Security chief? She nodded. He came to my house after I called you. He forced me into the car. Preston tried to stop him near the station. Where is Pike? He went after Preston. Why? Preston took the Reed archive. My stomach tightened. Does he have it now? I do not know. June cut the restraints. Marianne grabbed my sleeve. Nathan, the tunnel is going to collapse. That is why we are closing the intake. You cannot. We can try. She shook her head violently. Victor removed the normal controls. The intake can only be shut from the lower chamber. Then that is where I am going. Her grip tightened. No, you do not understand. Preston activated it. The words hung between us. Why? He thought Victor would forgive him. For failing at the workshop? Marianne's face changed. She knew. The man Rook attacked was Preston. Tears gathered in her eyes. I did not know he would hurt the dog. He poured fuel across the floor. Victor told him the workshop was empty. He cut my battery cable. He was frightened. He tried to burn my mother's property. He was trying to survive. I stared at her. Years of resentment stood between us, but beneath it I saw something worse. A mother building excuses while hers disappeared behind them. Marianne, how long have you protected him? She looked toward the black water. Since he was a child. That is not an answer. Her voice broke. Victor began using him when he was 15. Even the current seemed to quiet. Using him how? Preston was good with electronics. Victor paid him to repair radios at the pump station. Later he asked him to copy files from Mother's office. Samuel's suspicions had been correct. Preston had known about the lantern line for decades. Why did you allow it? I did not understand at first. And after you understood? Marianne looked at me. Victor had photographs, records, proof that Preston had taken personal information from veterans. He threatened to send him to prison, so you helped Victor buy the property. I thought if the land was sold, it would end. Things like this do not end when you feed them. Her expression hardened through the tears. You left. You do not get to judge what happened after you left. The words struck home because they were true. I had not been there. I had escaped into service, then into grief, then into the slow disappearance of my own life. But absence did not turn wrongdoing into innocence. You are right, I said. I left. Marianne stared at me. I should have come back. I should have answered Mother. I should have asked what was happening in this house. That belongs to me. I looked toward the lower tunnel. But what Preston chose belongs to him. Rook barked. A distant voice answered from below. Help, Preston. The passage shook. Water surged around our legs. Lila examined a crack spreading across the stone ceiling. We move now, she said. This section may have minutes. Frank and June lifted Marianne onto a rescue sling. She resisted. My son is down there, so am I said. She grabbed my hand. Nathan, do not leave him. For the first time since childhood, my sister spoke to me without pride, command, or accusation. Only fear. I will bring back whoever I can. The words were not a promise. I had learned what promises became under impossible conditions. Frank began moving Marianne toward the house. Rook remained beside me. I reached for his harness. You go with them. He pulled away. Rook. The current struck harder against our legs. He stepped toward the descending tunnel. His injured hip nearly gave way, but he caught himself. Lila looked at me. He has already decided. He is hurt. So are you. There was no time left to argue. I turned toward the lower chamber. Rook followed. Lila and the man carrying the quarry charges came behind us. His name was Coleman Price. He had worked blasting rock for road crews after leaving the army. The tunnel descended sharply. Water climbed to my thighs, then my waist. The current pulled toward a circular opening ahead. Metal groaned. A green light flashed inside the lower chamber. We entered through a steel doorway. The room was enormous compared with the passage. Old pump housings filled the center. Thick pipes ran into the lake-facing wall. New electrical panels had been got rusted gears and hand valves. At the far end, a round intake gate stood open. Lake water roared through it. Preston clung to a railing above the channel. One sleeve of his coat had been torn away. Blood covered his right arm. A black waterproof case was strapped across his chest. Owen Pike stood behind him. He was a compact man with a shaved head and a dark coat. A pistol rested against Preston's neck. Pike looked at me. You should have signed the property away. Rook growled. Pike smiled. The dog remembers me. You hit him at the workshop. I would have done more if your nephew had not panicked. Preston's face twisted. You said nobody would be there. Pike pressed the gun harder against him. You failed to check. I studied the room. The manual valve stood near Pike. A steel wheel connected to a long gear shaft. One tooth on the gear had been broken. A chain ran from the wheel to an electric motor mounted above the intake. Lila moved slowly to my left. Coleman stayed near the doorway. Pike noticed. Everyone stops. The chamber shook again. Dust fell from the ceiling. You are standing in a room that is coming apart, I said. I only need it to last another 5 minutes. What happens then? The Western Foundation collapses. The hidden room goes into the lake. Every record Evelyn kept becomes mud. The archive is on Preston. Pike laughed. That is one copy. Preston looked at me. There are more. Where? He started to answer. Pike struck him across the head with the pistol. Preston fell against the railing. Rook lunged. I caught the back of his harness before he entered the current. Pike aimed at him. Next time I shoot the dog. I moved between them. You came for me, I said. Let him go. I did not come for you. Victor sent you. Victor is trying to protect 50 years of work. Stealing from damaged veterans, moving abandoned money. No money is abandoned when somebody earned it. Pike's eyes narrowed. Your mother understood that sentiment was expensive. She kept the evidence hidden because she knew exposure would destroy more than Victor. What else would it destroy? Judges, hospitals, charities, pension funds. Half the people your mother helped received money from accounts tied to the network. Lila looked at me, Pike continued. North Lantern survived because Victor funded both sides. He took from some and gave to others. Evelyn condemned him in private and spent his money in public. The statement was designed to poison the truth. Perhaps part of it was true. My mother had admitted fear. She had admitted failure. She may have accepted money without understanding where it came from. But guilt shared was not guilt erased. You think that makes the theft mercy? I asked. I think the world is built by people willing to use dirty tools. Rook's growl deepened. Pike looked toward the water gauge. 3 minutes. Preston suddenly drove his head backward into Pike's face. The gun fired. The bullet struck a pipe above us. Steam exploded across the chamber. Pike lost his grip. Preston threw himself toward the valve wheel. Rook broke free from my hand. He crossed the narrow platform in 3 strides and struck Pike at the knees. Both went down. Pike fired again. The shot vanished into the roar of the water. I reached them as Pike kicked Rook against the railing. Rook's body rolled toward the open channel. I caught his harness with one hand. Pike struck me in the ribs. Pain blinded me. My grip slipped. Rook fell halfway over the edge. The current seized his rear legs. He clawed at the wet metal, unable to pull himself free. I dropped to my knees and grabbed him with both hands. Pike raised the pistol. Preston hit him with the black case. The weapon flew across the platform and disappeared into the water. Pike turned on Preston. They crashed against the valve wheel. Lila shouted from the control panel. The motor has locked the gate open. Can you release it? Not from here. Coleman pointed toward the gear housing. I can break the motor mount. What happens then? The gate drops. Will it close, maybe? And if the broken gear jams? The chamber floods faster. Another tremor moved through the room. A stone block fell near the doorway. Water sprayed through a crack in the wall. Rook slipped farther. I wrapped my arm through his harness and pulled. My injured ribs screamed. He fought with his front legs. For one terrible second his amber eye met mine. I saw trust there. Not fear. Trust. The same thing I had left in the tunnel years earlier. No, I said. Not you. I planted one boot against the railing and pulled with everything left in me. Rook came over the edge. He collapsed across my chest, shaking and coughing water. Pike threw Preston against the control panel. Preston fell. Pike ran toward the tunnel entrance. Coleman blocked him. Pike struck first, but Coleman absorbed the blow and drove his shoulder into Pike's chest. They crashed into the stone wall. Lila shouted again. We have less than 1 minute. I helped Rook stand. His injured leg dragged behind him. Preston crawled toward the black case. Leave it, I said. No. The chamber is failing. He reached for the strap. Pike broke free from Coleman and charged toward him. Rook moved before I could stop him. He did not leap. His injured body could no longer do that. Instead, he stepped directly into Pike's path and stood. Pike hesitated. Only for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Preston swung the black case upward and struck Pike beneath the jaw. Pike staggered backward. The platform railing, weakened by rust and pressure, broke behind him. He fell into the channel. His hands caught the edge. Water hammered his body against the metal. He looked at me. For one instant, he was not Victor's security chief. He was only a man about to drown. I moved toward him. Preston grabbed my coat. "Leave him." I looked at my nephew, then at Pike. My mother had closed a door on Wade Mercer because she was afraid. I understood her fear now. Saving Pike meant risking seconds we did not have. Leaving him would be easier. Easier was how these systems survived. I dropped flat and reached over the edge. "Take my hand." Pike stared at me. "Take it." He grabbed my wrist. Coleman seized my belt. Preston grabbed Coleman. Together we pulled Pike onto the platform. He lay coughing beside Rook. Lila pointed toward the motor. "Choose now." Coleman opened the quarry case. Inside were compact charges, wire, and a hand trigger. "How close?" I asked. I set one at the motor mount. "We enter the tunnel and trigger it from the first turn." "Do it." He attached the charge with practiced hand. Preston lifted the black case. "What is inside?" "The final ledger. Elias's partial transfer, Mother's recordings, Victor's payment lists." "Is there another copy?" Preston looked at me. "Yes." "Where?" His face crumpled. "Inside the porch bell." The house had been ringing above the evidence all along. Coleman finished wiring the charge. The chamber ceiling cracked. A line of black water burst through. "Move!" I shouted. We entered the tunnel. Coleman and Lila went first. Preston supported Pike, who could barely walk. I remained behind with Rook. He tried to follow, but his rear leg no longer held him. I lifted him. 90 pounds of wet fur, bone, and loyalty settled against my chest. The passage shook around us. Water climbed rapidly. Ahead, Coleman reached the first bend and raised the trigger. "Ready?" "No," I said. He pressed it anyway. The explosion struck like a giant fist. Air slammed through the tunnel. The lights went out. For 1 second, the world became water, darkness, and stone. Then a deeper sound rolled behind us. The intake gate fell. The current reversed. Water surged back toward the lower chamber, dragging debris with it. I lost my footing. Rook and I went under. The rope around my waist snapped tight. Someone pulled from ahead. My shoulder struck the wall. Cold water filled my mouth. I felt Rook slipping from my arms. I closed both hands around his harness. The rope pulled again. My head broke the surface. A flashlight appeared through the darkness. Preston was holding the line. "Give me the dog," he shouted. I could not answer. He moved closer, bracing himself against the wall. "Uncle Nathan, give me Rook." Years earlier, I had ordered Elias to stay behind a door while I tried to save everyone alone. Now Preston was asking me to trust him with the one life I valued more than my own. I pushed Rook toward him. Preston wrapped both arms around the dog. "I have him." The words reached a place inside me no explanation ever had. "I have him," not "I will try," not "trust me." I have him. We moved through the tunnel together. At the rising section, Frank and 2 veterans pulled us by rope toward the hidden room. June waited at the entrance. She took Rook. He lay still in her arms. "Is he breathing?" I asked. "Say it again." "He is breathing." Behind us, the tunnel collapsed. Stone and water struck the metal door. Frank slammed it shut and turned the key. The cedar wall bowed, then held. For several seconds nobody spoke. We listened to the house groan above us. The western foundation had not fallen. Not yet. We carried Rook into the kitchen. June placed him beside the stove and began working. She checked his airway, wrapped him in blankets, and listened to his chest. I knelt beside her. Rook coughed. Water spilled from his mouth. His amber eye opened. I lowered my forehead against his. "You disobeyed every order." His tail moved once beneath the blanket. Across the room, Marianne reached Preston. She struck him across the face. The sound cracked through the kitchen. Then she pulled him against her and held him as though he were still a child. Preston stood stiffly. Slowly his arms closed around her. Pike sat against the wall under guard. Blood ran from his nose. He looked toward the pantry. "You saved me," he said. I remained beside Rook. "That does not make you innocent." "No, you will tell the police everything." Pike laughed weakly. "You think Victor will allow me to reach a courtroom?" Arthur opened the front door. Cold wind entered with 2 county deputies and a state investigator wearing a dark weather jacket. Behind them stood Samuel Reed. He had left his chair and was supported between Frank and another Averin. Samuel looked at the black case in Preston's hands. "Is that Elias's archive?" Preston nodded. "Part of it." Samuel's face tightened. Where is the rest? Preston looked toward the silent porch bell. Arthur understood first. He went outside with one of the deputies. A few minutes later, they returned carrying a sealed metal cylinder hidden inside the bell's wooden support. Samuel placed his hand on it. For decades, the evidence had hung above the same porch where my mother welcomed strangers. Every storm had shaken it. Every warning had protected it. The state investigator introduced herself as Rachel Moss. She said federal agents were already moving toward Victor Harrow's Seattle residence and company offices. Who notified them? I asked. Samuel looked toward Pike. Pike lowered his eyes. I sent the location before entering the tunnel. Why? Victor ordered me to kill Preston after retrieving the archive. Preston's face went pale. Pike continued. I spent 30 years cleaning his mistakes. I finally understood I had become one of them. Rachel Moss took the black case. We will need statements from everyone. Mary Ann stepped forward. You will have mine. Preston looked at her mother. She did not turn. I spent my life calling fear protection. It has protected nothing. Outside, the storm began to weaken. The porch bell hung silent. The lake slowly returned to the exposed shore, covering the black mud and broken wood beneath a skin of dark water. Rook slept beside the stove. I stayed with one hand on his chest, counting every breath. Samuel lowered himself into a chair across from me. You went back for Pike, he said. Yes, that nearly killed you. Yes. Do you regret it? I looked at the injured dog beside me, my sister holding her son, and the veterans moving through the damaged house with lanterns in their hands. No, Samuel nodded. Then perhaps you finally understand, Elias. The answer hurt, but it did not wound me. That was different. Elias had entered the shaft because he believed the evidence might save people he would never meet. My mother had preserved it because she was trying to correct the door she once closed. Preston had nearly destroyed it because fear had trained him to obey. And I had spent years believing redemption was a private punishment. It was not. Redemption was work done in public. It was accepting the rope when someone threw it. It was handing your wounded dog to a man you did not yet trust. It was pulling an enemy from black water because mercy meant nothing if it only belonged to the deserving. Near dawn, the western wall of North Lantern shifted. Every person in the kitchen froze. A deep crack ran from the pantry door to the ceiling. Dust drifted into the firelight. Frank examined it. The foundation held, he said, but this part of the house may not survive another day. Mary Ann looked around the kitchen. What happens now? No one answered. The hidden room was damaged. The pump system was destroyed. The house faced years of repairs, unpaid assessments, legal battles, and the attention of people powerful enough to bury the truth beneath money and reputation. Victor had not yet been arrested. The archive had not yet been verified. Preston had confessed to nothing. North Lantern remained a death trap tied to a shoreline worth millions. I should have felt defeated. Instead, I looked at the people filling my mother's kitchen. Some had slept beneath this roof decades earlier. Some had crossed the mountains because a bell rang. Some had carried ropes. Some had carried tools. All of them had come. The house was not standing because of its foundation. It was standing because no one had faced the water alone. I rose beside Rook. My mother wanted this place reopened, I said. Mary Ann stared at me. You cannot be serious. I am. The county may condemn it. Then we repair it. The trust has no money. Then we find some. Victor will fight you. Then he fights all of us. Frank smiled. Lila removed her wet cap. Arthur straightened his torn coat. June continued, checking Rook's breathing, but I saw the corner of her mouth lift. Samuel looked toward the old kitchen table. North Lantern was never the building, he said. No, I answered. It was the door. The storm broke over Lake Chelan. Light appeared between the clouds and moved across the water in a narrow golden path. Rook opened both eyes. I carried him to the porch and wrapped a blanket around us. The old bell hung above our heads. Its brass surface was cracked. The rope was frayed. The wooden support had been cut open to retrieve the archive. It looked damaged beyond usefulness. Then the morning wind caught it. The bell gave one soft note. Rook lifted his head. Across the cove, another bell answered. Then another. From the ridge, from the eastern farm, from somewhere beyond the orchards. One by one, the people who remembered North Lantern rang back. The sound moved over the water as sunlight reached the house. For the first time in years, I did not hear a warning. I heard an invitation. 3 days after the tunnel flooded, North Lantern House was declared unsafe for human occupancy. The county inspector placed a red notice on the front door. No one may enter. Structural collapse possible. For most people, that notice would have meant the end. For the men and women gathered in the snow outside my mother's house, it became a list of things that needed fixing. Frank Dorsey read the notice twice, folded his arms, and looked toward the sagging western roof. Possible collapse, he said. That means it has not collapsed yet. Lila Grant studied the crack running above the pantry window. The western foundation needs temporary support before anyone works inside. Coleman Price pointed toward the ridge. We can divert the spring, shore up the tunnel, and pour new footings from outside. Arthur Sutter adjusted his white beard. With what money? Everyone turned toward me. I was sitting on the back step beside Rook. His rear leg was wrapped from hip to paw. The veterinarian had ordered complete rest, which Rook interpreted as a personal insult. Whenever someone carried a tool toward the house, he tried to stand and supervise. I kept one hand on his harness. The trust accounts are frozen, Arthur continued. The development company has filed claims against the property. The insurance carrier says the flood was caused by criminal interference and may not be covered. Victor's attorneys have already challenged Nathan's ownership. Frank looked at the red notice. So we are short on money. We are short on almost everything, Arthur said. Good. Arthur stared at him. Frank shrugged. We have experience with that. The first temporary shelter went up in June Holloway's barn. She cleared the stalls, brought in cots, and turned the heated workshop into a kitchen. Veterans from the Lantern Network arrived with blankets, folding tables, canned food, lumber, and stories about my mother that I had never heard. One man remembered the winter. She drove 70 miles through freezing rain to take him to a medical hearing. A woman named Darlene remembered arriving at North Lantern with 2 children, no money, and a husband who had promised to kill her. My mother hid her car behind the workshop and stood on the porch with a cast-iron skillet until the man left. An old Marine named Harold Finch remembered sleeping beneath the kitchen table because every bedroom was full. Your mother stepped over me all night, he said, never once complained. People came from Spokane, Tacoma, Walla Walla, and small towns I had never visited. Some brought checks, some brought tools, some could offer only a day of labor and a memory. Every memory made the house feel larger. Every memory made my absence heavier. Marianne and Preston stayed in a motel under police protection. My sister gave investigators everything she knew: bank records, messages from Victor, copies of property agreements, names of attorneys who had arranged guardianships for vulnerable veterans. She also admitted what she had done. She had signed false statements claiming the Lantern Trust was inactive. She had concealed Preston's theft of personal records. She had accepted money from Victor's companies and helped pressure my mother into selling the shoreline. Her confession did not excuse her. She'd do that. The first time she came to June's barn, no one welcomed her. Conversations stopped when she entered. Frank placed himself between her and the rows of cots. You cannot sleep here, he said. I did not come for a bed. Then say what you came for. Marianne looked around the room. Several of the people Victor had exploited were present. Some had lost savings. Others had spent years under court-appointed guardians who treated them like children while draining their benefits. My sister removed her pearl earrings and flamed them on the table. Then she removed her watch, then the gold bracelet our mother had given her. This is not enough, she said, but it is a beginning. Frank did not touch the jewelry. You think we want your pearls? No, her voice trembled. I think I've spent my life wearing things bought with silence. No one answered. Marianne looked toward me. I was sitting near the stove with Rook's head resting across my boots. I helped Victor because I was afraid Preston would go to prison, she said. Then every decision I made gave Victor more power over him. I called it protection because I could not bear to call it what it was. What was it? Frank asked. Cowardice. Preston entered behind her. His right arm was in a sling. A bandage covered the wound above his temple. Without the tailored suit and polished smile, he looked younger and far more tired. I made the copies, he said. The room became completely still. I entered North Lantern when I was 15. Victor told me my grandmother was hiding money that belonged to our family. I copied names from the files. Later, he used those names to identify veterans who had no close relatives, no permanent address, or no one likely to challenge a guardianship. An older man near the back rose from his chair. His name was Louis Parker. Victor's network had controlled Louis' pension for 9 years. You Preston looked at him. Yes. How much did you get? At first, $50. Louis gave a bitter laugh. $50. I was a child. You were not a child when you went back. No. You were not a child when you tried to burn the workshop. No. You were not a child when you opened the intake gate. Preston lowered his head. No. Louis stepped forward. Frank moved between them, but Louis raised one hand. I am not going to hit him. He looked at Preston for a long moment. I want him alive when he tells the court what he did. Preston nodded. I will. Marianne reached for her son. He stepped away from her. It was not rejection. It was the first honest distance between them. I need to stop letting you save me, he said. Her face collapsed. She covered her mouth with one hand. Preston turned toward me. Victor wants me dead. He may. He has people outside the companies. Judges, attorneys, private investigators, I know. If I testify, they will destroy everything they can find about me. They will not have to search very hard. His expression tightened. I deserve that. Deserving punishment and choosing truth are not the same thing. What do you want me to do? There it was again. Someone asking me to assign a mission so he would not have to choose. I thought of Samuel's words, do not ask an old man to assign you a mission. That decision belongs to you, I said. Preston glanced toward the barn doors. What would Elias have done? You are not Elias. What would you do? For most of my life, I would have disappeared. And now I looked around the barn at June stirring soup, at Frank repairing a broken cot, at Marianne standing without her jewelry, at Louis Parker waiting for an answer no apology could satisfy. At some point, I said, a man has to remain in the room where the truth is spoken about him. Preston lowered himself into a chair. Then he stayed. Victor Harrow was arrested in Seattle the following morning. He was released before sunset. His attorneys argued that the archival records were unreliable, that Owen Pike had acted without authorization, and that Preston was a confessed criminal, attempting to trade false testimony for leniency. Victor appeared outside the courthouse wearing a dark overcoat and the small gold mountain pin from my mother's photograph. Cameras surrounded him. He looked older than the man in the picture, but not weaker. His silver hair was combed perfectly. His voice was calm. He spoke of service, charity, and decades of support for struggling veterans. He called North Lantern a private Fidsky dispute. He described my mother as an elderly woman who had become confused. He described Preston as unstable, then he spoke my name. Nathan Calder is a troubled former serviceman with a documented history of violence, homelessness, and emotional impairment. He has seized upon his mother's deteriorating mental state to promote a conspiracy that does not exist. The statement played across every local news program. By evening, reporters were parked outside June's barn. One held a photograph from the warehouse incident where I had thrown a coworker to the ground. Another had obtained records of my divorce. A television host asked whether a man who lived in a camper should control a trust or operate a shelter. Victor understood warfare. He knew that destroying evidence was useful. Destroying the witness was better. Donations stopped for 2 days. A building supplier canceled a promised lumber delivery. The county scheduled an emergency hearing to determine whether North Lantern and the Lantern Trust should be placed under outside management. Arthur found me in June's workshop after midnight. I was cutting damaged boards into lengths for temporary supports. You need to stop, he said. The hearing is in 3 days. That is why you need sleep. I have slept enough. Arthur looked toward the doorway. Rook lay on a blanket near the heater. He was awake, watching me. You cannot rebuild the house before the hearing. I know, you cannot repair your reputation with a saw. I know. Then what are you doing? I shut off the saw. For a while, only the heater made noise. I am making something that holds weight. Arthur removed his glasses. Your mother was accused of many things over the years. Harboring criminals, interfering with guardianships, misusing donations. She never told me. She did not want your service record damaged by association. So she protected me with silence. Yes, and I punished her for it. Arthur leaned against the workbench. Evelyn made mistakes. Do not turn her into a saint because she died before you forgave her. The words were painful. They were also true. She sent Wade away, I said. Yes. She accepted Victor's money. Yes. She allowed Marianne and Preston to remain close to the records after she knew they had been compromised. Yes. Why? Because they were her family, so was I. Arthur's eyes softened. You were the child she believed could survive without her. That was convenient. It was cruel. I looked at him. He did not look away. She was wrong, he said. Parents can love deeply and still fail with precision. I turned toward Rook. The dog's breathing had become slow and uneven. I knelt beside him. His body felt warm beneath the blanket. Too warm, Rook. He lifted his head but did not stand. We took him to the animal hospital before dawn. The veterinarian examined him, ran blood tests, and took images of his chest and injured hip. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and wet fur. A clock ticked above the receptionist's desk. I had waited outside operating rooms for men wounded in combat. I had waited for military aircraft that returned with empty seats. Nothing had prepared me for waiting beneath a framed poster of smiling puppies while the only creature who had never abandoned me lay behind a white door. The veterinarian entered just after sunrise. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes. His hip injury is healing, she said. That is not the main concern. I stood. There is a mass near his spleen. The room became very quiet. It may have ruptured during the fall into the channel. He is bleeding internally. What do you do? Surgery may stop the bleeding. She hesitated. Rook is an older dog. His heart rhythm is irregular. Surgery carries significant risk. What happens without it? He may have hours, perhaps a day. Do the surgery. I need you to understand that he may not survive anesthesia. He survived the tunnel. Nathan, do it. She placed the consent form in front of me. My hand shook as I signed. Rook was lying on a rolling bed when they brought him through the hallway. His cloudy eye found me. I lowered my face to his. You come back, I whispered. His tail moved against the blanket. I mean it. He touched his nose to my chin, then the doors closed. I remained in the waiting room. June arrived first. Then Samuel. Then Frank, Arthur, Marianne, and Preston. No one had called them. Someone had rung the network. We sat together beneath the clock. Preston stood near the window. The hearing is tomorrow, he said. I know. Victor's attorney sent me an offer. Marianne looked at him. What offer? If I withdraw my statement and claim Owen Pike forced me to confess, Victor will guarantee a reduced charge in the property case. He says he can protect Mother too. Marianne's face hardened. No, Preston looked at her. You might go to prison. Yes, you could lose everything. I already lost everything that mattered while trying to keep what did not. Preston turned toward me. What should I tell them? I looked at the closed surgical doors. Rook had never asked whether loyalty was safe. He had never calculated whether I deserved protection. But human beings were not dogs. We carried fear forward. We dressed it in reason. We called surrender practical and silence merciful. Tell them nothing tonight, I said. Preston frowned. Decide in the morning when fear is not the only voice in the room. The surgery lasted nearly 3 hours. The mass had ruptured. The veterinarian removed it and controlled the bleeding, but Rook's heart stopped once during the procedure. They brought him back. When I was allowed to see him, he lay beneath a heated blanket with tubes running from his leg. His eyes remained closed. The veterinarian stood beside me. The next day will tell us more. I sat on the floor and placed my hand near his paw. I have a court hearing tomorrow, she nodded. You should go. I am not leaving him. He may sleep through the entire day. Samuel rolled his chair closer. No, he said. I looked at him. You are going to court. I will not leave Rook. You are not leaving him alone. June sat on the other side of the bed. Neither are we. I shook my head. He needs me. Samuel's expression sharpened. North Lantern needs you. I do not care about the house right now. This is not about the house. He pointed toward the sleeping dog. Rook did not enter the tunnel, so you could sit here, while Victor closes the door on everyone else. Anger moved through me. Do not use him to order me. I am not ordering you. I am reminding you what he has taught you. I looked at Rook's still body. Samuel's voice softened. Trust is not proven by refusing to leave. Sometimes trust means believing others will remain when you cannot. June placed her hand over mine. We have him. The words carried me back into the flooded tunnel. Preston holding the rope, Rook slipping from my arms. I have him, I stood slowly. Call me if anything changes. June nodded. Anything. The emergency hearing took place in the county courthouse beneath a sky heavy with snow. Reporters filled the steps. Camera crews crowded the entrance. Victor arrived through the front doors surrounded by attorneys. I entered through the same doors wearing Sullivan's old brown suit, which Frank had found stored inside the network bus. The sleeves were long, the shoulders were wide. It felt like borrowed armor. Marianne walked beside me. She wore a plain black coat and no jewelry. Preston followed behind us. He had not told me what he had decided. Inside, Judge Eleanor Briggs presided over the hearing. She was a white-haired woman in her late 60s with narrow glasses and a voice that attorneys choose their words carefully. Victor's lead attorney spoke first. He argued that the Lantern Trust had no legitimate beneficiaries, that my mother's recordings were emotionally unstable, and that North Lantern had been used to conceal stolen information. He presented my employment history, my psychiatric evaluation, the warehouse incident, photographs of my camper. He asked whether a man who could not maintain a permanent address was capable of managing a charitable property. Then he asked whether my military trauma made me prone to paranoid thinking. Every word was designed to return me to the person I had been in the law office. Dirty boots on an expensive floor, a man who believed shame was evidence. When I was called to testify, Victor looked at me across the courtroom. He smiled. His attorney approached. Mr. Calder, did you live in a camper behind a boat repair yard? Yes. Were you unemployed for significant periods? Yes. Did your marriage end after your behavior became unpredictable? Yes. Did you assault a coworker? I took him to the floor during a trauma response. So yes. Were you treated for nightmares, panic episodes, and violent reactions? Yes. Did you refuse continued treatment? Yes. Did you ignore your mother for more than a decade? The courtroom became silent. Yes. Yet you now ask this court to believe you are the person best qualified to carry out her wishes. No. The attorney stopped. Judge Briggs looked up. No, he asked. I am not the most qualified person in this room. A murmur moved through the benches. Then, why should the court leave the trust under your control? Because I am not asking to control it alone. The attorney frowned. I looked toward Frank, June, Samuel, Arthur, and the veterans seated behind them. My mother built North Lantern through a network of people. Some repaired roofs, some answered bells, some brought food. Some carried strangers out of storms. The mistake my family made was believing the house belonged to one person. Victor's smile disappeared. It does not, I continued. The house belongs to the purpose written into the trust. A locked door on a cold night, a safe bed, help given before shame becomes fatal. The attorney lifted my records. That does not answer. You are emotionally stable. No. Are you? I thought of Rook on the surgical table, of Elias in the tunnel, of my mother's voice beneath the pantry. I am a man who spent years avoiding people because I believed my pain made me dangerous. I hurt my wife by disappearing inside our marriage. I hurt my daughter by refusing her calls. I punished my mother with silence. I lived in a camper because accepting help felt harder than being cold. The attorney turned toward the judge. This is not relevant. It is the entire point, Judge Briggs said. Continue. I looked at the people behind me. Homelessness did not make me dishonest. Trauma did not make me useless. Failure did not erase the work I could still do. But I would not trust North Lantern to the man I was a month ago. Victor leaned toward his attorney. So what changed? The attorney asked. I stopped trying to save everyone alone. The courtroom remained silent. I am asking the court to appoint an independent board. Veterans from the Lantern Network, legal oversight, medical and financial professionals, former residents, people who will question one another, people who will keep records where no single frightened person can bury them. The attorney's voice sharpened. And you? I will repair the doors. A soft laugh moved through the back benches. The attorney did not smile. You are turning a legal hearing into a sermon. No. I am telling you that a man does not need to be perfect to become useful. Victor's attorney returned to his table. Arthur presented the trust agreement. Federal investigators authenticated portions of the archive recovered from the porch bell. Banking specialists showed money moving from veterans' benefit accounts into companies controlled by Victor. Then Owen Pike testified through a secure video connection. He described Victor's orders to destroy the hidden room, flood the tunnel, and eliminate Preston after recovering the archive. Victor remained calm. His attorneys attacked Pike's credibility. Then Preston was called. He walked toward the witness stand with his injured arm held against his body. Marianne closed her eyes. The clerk asked him to swear that he would tell the truth. Preston looked at Victor. Victor gave him a small nod. The same kind of nod a man gives an employee who knows what is expected. Preston turned toward the judge. "My name is Preston Vale," he said. "I copied the first Lantern files when I was 15 years old." Victor's attorney rose. "Your Honor, we object to any statement made under coercion." Preston continued. "I returned to the property many times. I installed surveillance devices. I photographed records. I helped Victor identify veterans whose finances could be controlled." Victor's face changed, only slightly, but I saw fear enter it. Preston described the workshop, the gasoline, the cut battery cable, the intake gate. He admitted that he had nearly killed his uncle, his mother, and everyone beneath North Lantern. "Why are you telling the truth now?" the judge asked. Preston's voice shook. "Because I spent my whole life believing someone powerful could protect me from consequences." He looked at Marianne. "My mother tried." She lowered her head. Victor promised he could. Victor stared at him. "And my grandmother kept giving me chances. I used to hurt other people." Preston breathed slowly. "I do not want another chance that requires someone else to stay silent." Victor's attorney approached. "Mr. Vale, have federal prosecutors offered you leniency?" "Yes, so your testimony is purchased." "No, you expect a reduced sentence." "I hope for one." "Then you benefit from accusing my client." Preston looked toward Louis Parker. "I benefited from accusing no one for 19 years. The attorney stopped. Preston's voice strengthened. "That is what brought me here." The final witness was Samuel Reed. He presented Elias's notebook and recording. The audio filled the courtroom. Elias speaking from the flooded chamber, the archive, the service shaft, the gunfire. The warning that someone on the surface had closed the room. Federal investigators had matched payment records from the date of the operation to a security subcontractor controlled by Victor Harrow. Victor had ordered the tunnel flooded overseas, just as he had ordered North Lantern flooded years later. The pattern was the evidence. He did not merely destroy people. He used water, distance, and confusion to make their disappearances look inevitable. When the recording ended, Victor stood. "This is absurd." His attorney tried to stop him. Victor pushed the man aside. "You think a dead sailor's recording proves I ordered anything? You think frightened old people and a homeless soldier can rewrite history?" Judge Briggs struck the desk with her gavel. "Mr. Harrow, sit down." Victor pointed toward me. "Your mother took my money." "Yes," I said. "She used my attorneys, yes. She benefited from the system you now condemn." "Yes." The courtroom watched us. Victor smiled. "Then she was no better than I was." I thought of Arthur's warning. "Do not turn her into a saint because she died before you forgave her." "My mother was afraid," I said. "She made compromises. She closed a door on Wade Mercer. She accepted help without asking enough questions. Then she spent the rest of her life trying to correct what she had done." Victor's expression hardened. "That is the difference between you." "What difference?" "She regretted becoming like you." Victor lunged across the aisle. Court officers caught him before he reached me. His gold mountain pin tore from his coat and struck the floor. The sound was small. For decades, the man had controlled companies, judges, attorneys, and terrified families. In the end, his power sounded like a piece of metal falling on stone. Judge Briggs issued her ruling late that afternoon. The Lantern Trust would remain active. North Lantern would be placed under an independent board with Nathan Calder serving as restoration director, but not sole controller. Victor's development agreement was declared invalid, pending the wider criminal investigation. All shoreline sales were frozen. Funds recovered from the fraudulent companies would be placed into a supervised restitution program for affected veterans. Victor was taken into custody before leaving the courtroom. Marianne and Preston were referred for sentencing after their cooperation had been reviewed. There was no sudden forgiveness, no magical erasure. Truth opened a door. They would still have to walk through it. I left the courthouse before the reporters could surround me. My telephone showed 7 missed calls from June. For 1 second, I could not move. Then I called her. She answered immediately. Nathan. What happened? Woke up. My knees nearly gave way. He is awake. He is angry. Angry? He tried to remove the tube from his leg and growled at a golden retriever in the next room. I closed my eyes. That sounds like him. The veterinarian says he is stable. They sent the mass for testing. We will know more later. I am coming. When I reached the animal hospital, the waiting room was empty. June led me to the recovery area. Rook lay beneath a blanket, eyes open. His body looked smaller than it had the day before. A line of gray showed beneath his muzzle. His breathing was shallow but steady. Victor lost, I said. His ear moved. Preston testified. His tail touched the blanket once. North Lantern stays. He looked at me. I placed my forehead against his. You stay too. The mass was cancer. The veterinarian said it had already spread. Surgery had given Rook more time, but no one could say how much. Perhaps weeks, perhaps months. I took him home to June's barn. North Lantern required nearly a year of repair. The Western Foundation had to be rebuilt. The damaged tunnel was permanently sealed. The pantry room was preserved, but every record was copied and stored in several secure locations. The porch bell was repaired. We left the crack in its brass. Frank said a bell that had survived that much should be allowed to show it. Mary Ann sold her townhouse, her jewelry, and her share of the Orchard Trust. Most of the money went into restitution. She received a reduced sentence that included confinement, community service, and years of financial supervision. Preston served time in federal prison. Before he left, he gave me a box containing every photograph he had taken from North Lantern. I cannot ask you to forgive me, he said. No, I hurt Rook. Yes, I nearly killed all of you. Yes, his eyes filled, but he did not look away. Will there ever be anything I can do? There will be work. After prison? Especially after prison, he nodded. For the first time in his life, no one promised to protect him from the cost. That may have been the first honest gift our family ever gave him. Samuel moved into a small cottage near the restored house. June refused a cottage because she said her barn had better light. Frank became chairman of the board. Lila supervised the new water system. Arthur handled the trust until he retired, then continued appearing every Thursday because retirement had not improved his ability to mind his own business. I called my daughter. Her name was Claire. She answered after the second ring. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Dad, she said. My voice failed. I had faced armed men in darkness. I had entered flooded tunnels. Nothing had frightened me like hearing my daughter say one word. I am sorry, I said. She began crying. So did I. We did not repair 15 years in one conversation. We began with 10 minutes, then photographs. She sent me a picture of my grandson, who had my ears and no idea who I was. In spring, she brought him to North Lantern. He was 6 years old and afraid of large dogs. Rook was thin by then. His strength had faded, and he walked with a harness around his hips. Yet when my grandson entered the porch, Rook lowered himself to the floor and waited. The boy approached one step at a time. Rook placed his gray muzzle in the child's hand. By afternoon, they were asleep together beside the restored fireplace. I sat across the room with Claire. You kept, she said. He kept me. North Lantern officially reopened in early summer. We did not call it a shelter. We called it a landing place. The bedrooms had strong doors, clean blankets, and windows facing the lake. The kitchen table was built from wood salvaged from the damaged western wall. Above the porch, the restored bell hung beneath a new sign. North Lantern House. No one stands watch alone. The first guest was a 76-year-old Navy veteran named Calvin Brooks. He had been living in a motel after a medical scam consumed his retirement savings. He arrived carrying one suitcase and an apology. I do not want to be trouble, he said. I opened the door. Trouble is already inside. You will have company. He laughed. That first night, 12 people sat around the kitchen table. Soup steamed in bowls. Rain moved across the lake. Rook lay beside my chair, too tired to make his evening rounds. I carried his bed to the porch after supper. The air was warm. The water reflected the house lights in long golden lines. He rested his head on my knee. You heard the room, I said. His cloudy eye watched the lake. You heard the machine. You found the tunnel. You found Mary Ann. His breathing had become very slow. You found me before all of them. I placed my hand against his chest. For years his heartbeat had brought me back from dreams. That night I counted each as though gratitude could make time obey. Claire found us near dawn. She touched my shoulder. Dad, I already knew. Rook's head remained on my knee. The first morning light had reached the far ridge. His eyes were closed. His body was warm beneath my hand, but the great loyal heart inside him had gone still. I did not call his name. He had answered every time I needed him. He had earned his rest. We buried him beneath a cedar tree overlooking the cove. Veterans came from across the state. Samuel placed Elias's service patch beside the grave. June brought Rook's old water bowl. My grandson placed a wooden toy boat near the stone. On the marker we carved only a few words. Rook, he stayed. After everyone left, I remained beside him. The lake wind moved through the branches. For the first time since I had met him, I was alone. But I was not abandoned. There is a difference. Behind me, the porch door opened. Claire stepped outside. My grandson held her hand. Samuel waited near the bell. June stood beside Frank. Inside, people moved through the kitchen. A chair scraped. Someone laughed. A kettle began to whistle. The house was alive. My mother had once told me I could not spend my whole life standing watch outside my own door. Rook taught me how to cross it. I walked back toward North Lantern. Before entering, I reached for the bell rope. The brass note traveled over the lake. A bell answered from the eastern ridge, then another from beyond the orchards. My grandson pulled the door open. Warm light fell across the porch. For most of my life, I believed coming home meant finding a place where nothing could hurt me. I was wrong. A home is not a place beyond pain. It is a place where pain does not force you to stand alone. North Lantern had never been worthless. Neither had my mother. Neither had Preston. Neither had the veterans Victor stole from. Neither had I, and the old German shepherd sleeping beneath the cedar had known that long before any of us. Some doors are opened with keys, some are opened with truth. The most important ones are opened by the soul that remains beside you until you are brave enough to enter. Nathan and Rook remind us that being broken does not mean being worthless. A person may lose a home, a career, a family, or even the courage to ask for help. Yet one open door, one faithful companion, or one honest act can become the beginning of a new life. Real strength is not facing every battle alone. Real strength is accepting the hand that reaches for us and remaining when someone else needs that same hand. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you will not miss another story from our channel. Your quiet support allows us to keep telling meaningful stories about courage, loyalty, second chances, and the people who prove that no one should face the darkest night alone.